Somewhere in Northern Europe, a 5-star spa and hotel caters to anyone who can afford it, but things are amiss, especially as the mold sets in. Corpses begin appearing around the facility and no one acknowledges them. And that's just the beginning. Soon the black substance spreads and starts transforming the staff and clients into Eldritch-style abominations. Still, no one bats an eye. This is a world-class spa after all, and business must continue as usual. If you're a fan of David Lynch, Junji Ito, or Spirited Away, Spa is a must-read. This is an absolute nightmare sealed within the pages of a graphic novel. This is Spa. Hello friends, this is Grief speaking, and today we're going to be looking at Spa by Swedish author Erik Svetoft. I stumbled upon this comic by accident and honestly fell in love with it. If you like Beautiful Darkness, which I covered previously, you'll find some similarities in the horror here. And much like Beautiful Darkness, there's not a straightforward narrative. You're essentially watching as a cosmic horror overtakes a spa hotel. But under the surface and in the background, there is a lot to dissect, which makes this one perfect for theories as to what's really going on. I'm going to walk you through what happens from start to finish and wrap up with popular interpretations of Spa as well as my own wacky theory, so stay tuned for that. You guys should go subscribe to my second channel, Grief Speaks, for more casual and behind the scenes videos. I recently uploaded a tour of the Grief backdrop as well as my second mask, which never saw the light of day. I'll put a link in the description, but we have a lot to get to, so without further ado, this is Spa by Erik Svetoft explained. Spa starts off vague, surreal, and unsettling, and it keeps this tone for the rest of the comic. We see a man with slicked back hair in a bathrobe. He's on his knees in the dirt. He's got an off-putting smile and just calmly sits there as 3 cartoon-like characters close in on him with deadly weapons, seemingly beating him to death. Around them is a strange black sludge that seems to be growing around the bleak city buildings nearby. In one of the buildings, a woman looks down through an apartment window. Her husband then asks her if they live here, and she responds, "I guess so." They detect a foul odor and look in the bathroom to see 2 corpses rotting, one in the tub and one face down in the toilet. And shortly after this, they find a body in the kitchen and another in the hall. The couple shows no emotion or surprise at the dead people, and the man suggests they go on a relaxing weekend, maybe unwind a little and think about something else for a few days. Since there's been a weird atmosphere here lately, maybe it'll be better when they get back. As they discuss this on the couch, we can see opposite them in an armchair is another corpse rotting away. The art style is beyond creepy, not just on the corpses, but the bland faces of the living, and get used to it because many of the people in this comic have basically the same face. What's creepier than the situation itself is the complete lack of reaction from the couple, as if seeing dead bodies in your apartment is nothing but a minor annoyance. Not only that, but they don't even seem sure that they live here. This is a running theme in this comic that adds a really unsettling dreamlike quality. The next section seems straight out of a Wes Anderson film, with several spa employees talking directly to the camera, or in this case the reader. We learn that this is an award-winning facility that takes a holistic view, providing space for relaxation and human interaction. There's something for everyone, so open your mind, gain fresh insight and energy. We see a montage of people enjoying the benefits of the spa, and then the spa director saying he looks forward to your visit, followed by a pretty freaky couple sharing some champagne. Their smiles are just not right. Next, we follow a new employee on his first day on the job. His supervisor walks him through his duties, which entails keeping fresh towels stocked throughout the facility and discarding the used ones. His supervisor then mentions that today is inspection day. This is actually an important detail. Elsewhere in the shower, some cleaners discover a strange black gunk and have a hard time removing it. Assuming it's some kind of moisture damage, they decide to call in some technicians. As the new guy delivers some towels, we can see the liquid covering the ceiling, some of which drips onto his shoulder. In the hotel cafeteria, the couple from the beginning are enjoying their stay. They discuss how great of an idea this was. However, they spot something weird across the cafeteria. At one of the tables sits another corpse, its skin shriveled and rotted. It's a disturbing sight, and like usual, everyone completely ignores it. At the same time, a business is having a conference here and is treating its employees to the spa for the weekend. One of the employees says he's going to check out early as he has some important business to attend to. Just a side note, since there are no names in this comic and there are a lot of characters, it can get confusing, so I'm going to call this character Blonde Guy so you know who I'm talking about. As he leaves the cafeteria, a strange looking guy locks eyes with him and calls him a loser. Elsewhere, we see the spa director sitting cross-legged, wearing a Speedo and smoking in his office. Soon, his personal assistant comes in to inform him that they have a VIP guest and that he should welcome them personally. As the assistant leaves, her inner monologue informs us that she has feelings for the director and wonders if he feels the same. As she walks down the hall, she finds some of the black sludge on the walls and floor. She sees a cleaner nearby and scolds her for the mess. Two gentlemen enter the front doors of the spa. One is wearing a police uniform. They say they're here for the inspection, and while the receptionist informs the director, the cop has a hard candy from a bowl on the counter. He clearly enjoys it and then proceeds to dump the entire bowl into his jacket, which made me laugh. The receptionist then hands them a briefcase that seems full of money and they leave. Next, the VIP customer enters, a tan man with exquisite taste. We see a little montage of the rest of the spa, including a pretty big image of the lounge. I can't help but scan the page, looking for anything strange or sinister in the background, but other than some creepy looking individuals, it seems normal. The VIP gets situated in a robe and has a martini, while the director's assistant inspects the employees to make sure everything is in order for their special guest. She sees the new guy has a spot on his shirt from the sludge and gives him a dirty look after cleaning it off. The director then comes into the lounge to greet the VIP. He gives him the whole spiel about how great the facilities are and has someone escort the man to his room. Shortly after, the assistant whispers in the director's ear and points at the new guy. Next, we see a lonely looking man sitting in his room when a woman escorts him to his scheduled massage. He enters the room and sees the massage therapist, who is pretty weird looking. He's shirtless with black tights and long spiny fingers. Kind of looks like a Smiling Friends character or something. He has the man lay down and talks about how important it is to stretch first and limbers up in a series of weird poses before beginning the massage. It's uncomfortable to watch as his long deformed fingers press into the man's back. He then applies a face mask, and one thing I like about this comic is that on paper there's nothing weird about this scenario, but it's just slightly off in a couple of different ways, which really puts a chill down your spine. The man thanks him and the massage therapist seems happy with himself for a job well done. However, he looks at himself in the mirror and the smile fades. After giving a few more massages, he sees some of his coworkers chatting and asks them if they want to do something after work, but they blow him off. It's kind of sad, actually. Somewhere else in the facility, the blonde guy from the company retreat is lost and wandering through the spa. Strangely, he can't find another person, and many of the large rooms are empty. The water here is pretty dark as well. Finally, he stumbles upon an employee and asks for directions. She points him to hopefully the right place, and he continues on his search. This employee was actually taking a lunch order to the VIP suite, and she enters to find him wearing a face mask and doing some exercises. I can't help but think of the opening scene of American Psycho and Patrick Bateman's morning routine. He takes one look at the meal that she brought and calls it inadequate, saying everything he consumes must be first class, and he sends it back. The woman brings it to the kitchen and dumps it into the garbage, telling the chef to get his shit together. The chef watches her trash the meal he worked so hard on and begins to shed a tear. Now that's just funny. There's a quick panel of the spa stairwell, which has a black fungus growing on it. Then we get back to the new guy who's been called into the director's office. The director says he's gotten some complaints about cleanliness and goes on a bit of a tangent. It quickly shifts from chastising the new guy over the dirty shirt to talking about what makes a good leader. The director clearly likes to toot his own horn. He then proceeds to tell a story of how he became director, which we see in a detailed flashback. He's a little boy playing on the beach when suddenly a bird is shot out of the sky, its body falling in a gory mess. We see the culprits, and it seems to be the cartoon-faced thugs from the opening. They hold up the bloody bird and smile as its entrails fall onto their faces. Okay. The kid pays no mind and keeps building a sandcastle while his father, a disheveled drunk, rambles about how he made his first million. He gets up to show his son some sandcastle tips, but trips and falls, destroying it. Soon, someone calls for the father to return to the spa for a board meeting. On the drive back, he says he's tired of being director and decides to hand the position over to his son. The boy says that he'll do his best, and we see his face shift into the adult version, bringing us back to the present. Apparently, that was the last time he ever spoke to his father. He segues poorly into talking about how the lesson is that employees should always wear clean uniforms. He then tells the new guy that his coworkers are waiting for him back in the conference room for a team building exercise. When the new guy arrives, he finds a chair sitting in the center of the room and several employees standing around it ominously. He sits in the chair and the director's assistant places a pig nose on him. She then tells the others to start the exercise and continue for 30 minutes. They all lean over him making pig noises and oinking. Jesus, talk about a humiliation ritual. We see some more images of the various spa rooms as the black mold continues to spread and the employees are none the wiser. In one instance, a hotel guest spots an unusual looking person being escorted down a hall. They follow out of curiosity, and when they get a better look, the person's face seems to be missing and their skin has a strange texture. It's a spooky sight, and this is not the last time we'll see this faceless entity. We see the director pacing around, trying to remember what he was supposed to be doing when he gets distracted by a painting of a ski slope. He looks at it and sees a little cartoon character appear on top. They ski down the slope and meet with two friends at the bottom. It's a cute little scenario, but you might notice that these three characters resemble the thugs that beat the man to death at the beginning and shot the bird on the beach. Weird. His imagination is interrupted by his assistant, who informs him they have a small bookkeeping problem. She takes him to the spa safe where all the cash has been rotted by the black mold. All of the company's money is destroyed. The director says it's a shame, but he's an expert problem solver and can figure it out. The assistant asks what they're going to do about the inspection fees, but the director again says he'll take care of it. We check back in with the couple from the opening who comment about the unusual nature of one of the spa's areas. The water is black and there's strange, hellish plant life growing up everywhere. One of the staff members points them to a mineral bath nearby. While the ceiling above is covered in the substance, the bath itself seems fairly unaffected. So the couple relax in the water. This is the good life. Soon they both look over, however, and find the rotted corpse of yet another guest at the end of the bath. It's a ghastly image, and even creepier, the dead woman's hand slowly raises up and points at them. The couple just pauses for a second and then says, maybe we should have a sauna instead. Okay, well, maybe these weird human husks aren't exactly dead. I really don't know, but that's the first time we've seen one move. It then cuts to the couple in the sauna with no emotion like usual, although they're sitting next to yet another body. This one's face is torn off and neatly sitting on a towel nearby. My God. The man asks, have we done something wrong? And his wife replies, maybe we have. Okay, so they seem to have some acknowledgement of what's happening, but it's really hard to tell if they're seeing what we're seeing. In the break room, the massage therapist looks a little sad as he listens to the other staff members talking about how much fun they had on a night out. Soon, the new guy walks in, still wearing the pig snout. A couple of his coworkers apologize for being so hard on him, but that's just how things work around here. They smile at him, and in the hallway behind, he can see a person with a bizarre pig head peeking out. It's holding a coffee mug much like him. It's hard to tell if this is an actual entity he's seeing or just a reflection of how he feels wearing the snout. In this comic, it's probably both. The substance continues to spread across the facility, and in the showers, a cleaner tries to get things spotless when she's approached by the technicians. They are interesting to say the least. They're identical twins and have straight up cartoon faces, though these are notably different than the three cartoon figures that the director has seen. They get to work right away, pulling off a wall panel to reveal an elaborate set of pipes. They pull out a schematic and it's crazy complicated, might as well be for alien technology. The technicians go through their tools and it straight up turns into a Three Stooges style comedy act where one of them accidentally bashes their own head with a mallet, followed by the other doing the same thing. It's almost a nice break from the pure dread that is this comic, but these handymen are so damn creepy, so you can never really let your guard down. Well, next they use the mallet to straight up smash the pipes open for some reason, and the black gunk comes spraying out. They continue trying to fix the problem, but the results are disastrous. Eventually, they are waist deep in the floor with pipes broken and strewn about the room. Next, we see a guest coming out of a bath that is drenched in the black stuff. As she exits, it's clear that she's formed strange boils on her forearm. Elsewhere, the blonde guy is still lost and wandering around, now regretting leaving his colleagues. He happens upon his boss and asks if he's seen the others, but the man just smiles at him and then straight up walks through a wall. What the hell? The blonde guy says, that was weird. He didn't even say hi. He's usually so talkative. Right, that's the weird part. He continues walking when someone approaches him from behind. And who is it but him? or at least someone who looks exactly like him. The only difference being that the doppelganger's eyes are a little googly. He just looks pissed off and punches his clone in the stomach before walking away. What the fuck is going on here? We check in with the other company employees and see the weird looking guy who keeps calling everyone losers. He can't find his buddies and tracks them down to a mysterious room. And a massive gangly fingered arm reaches out, grabbing the guy by the head and pulling him inside, crushing his face in the process. Like usual, the others just smile like nothing happened. Then we see some more images of the spa as the substance spreads, only this time things are more overtly messed up. In one image we see some creepy guests staring at us, and in the background a skeleton lays on the floor. The next panel is the most frightening abomination yet. The torso of a guest has transformed into something straight out of Resident Evil. Between its protruding ribs we can see dozens of faces gnashing their teeth. All this atop unusually long legs covered in boils. In the next image, a guest has turned into a long slug-like creature, though we can't see their face. Things have definitely taken a hard turn. We then see the new guy sitting alone in his room with the pig snout still on his face. His walls are covered in the black mold. He suddenly begins hearing pig noises coming from behind his dresser. He slowly moves it and finds a hole in the wall. Inside is a disturbing sight. Real pigs screaming amongst the black liquid and strange fungus. The guy reaches in and rescues the pigs from the hole. He looks down and smiles at them. And what happens next is batshit crazy. We get a fairly normal shot of a hallway, and then suddenly dozens of deformed humanoid pig beings come flowing out covered in black filth. It's one of the most disturbing panels I've seen in recent memory, as more and more pour out in a grotesque circus of deformed anatomy. The new guy is in the middle, riding on top of one of the biggest pigs. There is a lot to look at in this image alone. Some of the pigs look like cartoon characters, while others are disturbingly realistic, and there's a lot of weird shit going on, like this woman with a pig head who has pigs as breasts. I mean, what the hell am I reading? We then get another glimpse of a random spa room. The guests casually stare in the corner where a giant floating head comes out of the ground. We then see three guys sitting in a sauna. One of them says, "You know, I've been thinking." It zooms out to show the three guys again, only the room is covered in black filth and one of them has boils all over him. He pauses and says, "Nothing specific." It zooms out again and things have progressed severely. The man with boils' face is gone and the room is completely full of fungus. Soon the strange material bursts out of the guy's head and closes in on the other two, who just sit calmly. The man says that he can get a little anxious sometimes, and the other man asks, anxious about what? They just stare at the pure body horror in front of them, and the man responds, "Nah, it's nothing, never mind." I mean, talk about denial. It's actually kind of comical, the lack of concern here. Next, we see the VIP guest laying on the floor with a hatchet in his back. It seems the chef didn't like the remarks he made about his cooking and in a rage killed the man. He sits on the floor by the tanned corpse in a panicked sweat for a moment before hatching a plan. He's already got darker skin, so he dyes his hair blonde and shaves his mustache in order to assume the VIP's identity. He actually already has basically the same face shape as the VIP guest. There's a running theme in this comic with alter egos and misplaced identity, but we'll talk about that later. The chef then wraps up the corpse along with his chef uniform and throws it into a large body of water. It's unclear exactly where this is, so it could be somewhere outside or in one of the pools. Just after he disposes of the body, the director spots the chef and believes that it is the VIP guest. He apologizes for the food not being up to snuff. The chef says it was only a misunderstanding and that the food was excellent. He then rushes off, saying he needs to check out immediately. The director looks over and sees a trail of black sludge leading down a hallway. He turns the corner to find that it is eerily dark and a figure stands in the hall. The director starts yelling at the mystery person about making such a mess. Then they turn their head and we see that it's the man in the pig snout. His eyes are now black and he just gives a menacing stare. Well, the director isn't fazed and continues to berate him when suddenly the room is filled with the humanoid pigs in all their body horror glory. They begin to surround the director in a haunting display of unsettling insanity. The director stays calm and looks a little puzzled by the whole ordeal. The man in the pig snout says nothing and just continues past the director with his army of pigs. The director just sits on one of the lounge chairs as the room around him fills with filth and fungus. He feels like the only one around here who truly cares about good service and quality. He looks over at a painting on the wall of a tree and has yet another daydream. The three cartoon characters wander through the woods picking berries when they're approached by a bear. Instead of attacking them, it eats some of their berries and befriends them. He's snapped out of this by the two property inspectors inspectors from earlier. They complain that the latest payment was less than usual. The director tries to explain that there was a small financial mishap, but the police officer picks up a vase and smashes it on the ground, while the other man says when payments are late, there are consequences. The officer then picks the director up and straight up yeets him into the wall. The way this is illustrated just looks really funny. It made me laugh out loud the first time I saw it. The man says they'd appreciate it if they get all the money next time. The director lay with blood running from his nose. His assistant runs to help him and once again contemplates telling him how she feels. But he rushes off and runs into the two technicians, telling them to get back to work. There's another montage of the various spa areas. In one, a guest pours some champagne while their head has completely transformed into a demonic pig. In another, an old man rests in a hot tub with his eyes closed while three amorphous entities move in on him, their heads elongated and bodies decayed. One image shows some guests enjoying a soak in a pool while a massive entity sits next to them. Its body is bloated and head stretched out. Then, in one of the strangest and in some ways funniest images in this book, we see a corpse laying on the ground with its face torn off, the black liquid pouring onto the floor. Okay, that's actually really dark. That's not the funny part. There's a small skull-like head poking out of the guy's butt for some reason. It's another moment that was so bizarre I couldn't help but laugh. We see the chef packing up and getting ready to leave the spa when he opens his room door to find the VIP guest alive and wearing the chef's outfit. He's also wet and holding the cleaver. I guess he somehow survived. It cuts to another random spa image. This one may be my favorite. A bunch of swimmers are lounging by the side of the pool and staring above it, where a giant disembodied head floats screaming. I love the contrast here. It looks really cool. The blonde guy is still lost in the spa and now he has some boils growing on his face. He sees what looks like the couple from the opening, only their faces are messed up. Their eyes are missing and their mouths are all dried out. They get closer and their faces are actually fine. It must have just been the lighting. He asks them what time it is and they say they have no idea and walk away. The blonde guy yells after them, telling them they don't have to act so stuck up. He says he should probably get some ointment for his rash. Then he encounters the doppelganger again, only this time it's him as an old man with a beard. He just ignores it and starts to walk away when he is suddenly shot by a harpoon which pierces him through the side. I can't say I expected that. A woman comes up holding a harpoon gun and just says, "Oh, sorry, I thought you were someone else," and then walks away as if it was a minor incident. The guy just says, "No worries, accidents happen," and says he'll be fine, it's nothing serious. Meanwhile, the harpoon is sticking out of his back and his robe is soaked in blood. It then cuts to a guest walking through the halls when suddenly the weird guy who calls everyone a loser appears. The long hand is still grasping his throat, and now he's holding two people of his own by the neck. They reach for the man and we get a cool wide shot of basically an infinite line of people choking each other. It's visually a really cool idea. Reminds me of something you'd see in Junji Ito. We see the couple laying in bed while a ghastly face floats in the blackness outside their window. They look at each other and start kissing while an even more disturbing entity walks by. The couple then start having sex under the covers, a pretty awkward exchange considering freaky ass entities keep looking in through the window. In a truly bizarre sequence, the couple is replaced by distorted monstrosities continuing the act, and the real couple standing naked is now watching them through the window. Then they suddenly have the robes back on and are standing by the bed, and the two human husks lay there motionless. It then shifts back to the couple laying in the bed and two ghoulish monsters embracing each other on the other side of the window. Soon the faceless figure from earlier approaches them and we see them snatched out of the room through the window. Are you confused? I sure as hell am. We get another few images of the spa. In one, a girl stands calmly staring at the reader and behind her is a massive human head filling up the hallway. In another, the two technicians simply shrug at us with the showers completely destroyed behind them. There's also a strange page featuring the director staring into one of the pools at a version of himself swimming in the black water. Next, the assistant seems to be wrapping up another team building exercise. This time an employee stands in a corner wearing a dunce cap. Not clear what just went down, but I'm sure it was unpleasant and cruel. The assistant spots the director and tells him there's been some major issues, that the staff lacks discipline and several guests have asked for their money back. Funny enough, she doesn't mention the cosmic horror abominations that have taken over the place. He says that he just needs a moment in his office, and as they speak, they see a trail of black liquid and several of the pig creatures roaming the halls, the substance spewing from their snouts. We jump ahead to the director in his office, and the pig creatures are running rampant inside, although he doesn't react. Then his father father from the flashback shows up. He tells his son that he regrets handing over the spa, and that certain situations require a real leader. He grabs the director's badge off of his shirt and puts it on himself. He says he's about to have a board meeting addressing all the issues going on and tells the son to pack his things up. While they speak, the office is being destroyed by the creatures. The father heads down the hallway and is confronted by the property inspectors, who start beating him up immediately. They tell him that they need to get the inspection fees. It's becoming clear that these guys are not inspectors but mobsters of some sort. The new director then pulls out a small horn and blows it. Elsewhere, there are several employees playing cards in a basement room, including everyone's favorite weirdo massage therapist. In the corner of the room sits a person in military garb and a beret. They almost look like a dog person or something. When they hear the sound of the horn, they stand up and grab 2 briefcases before leaving the room. He finds the director and the thugs and hands them the briefcases, which I guess hold his own personal money. The men then thank him for the understanding, and the director gets up and rushes towards his board meeting. One of the mobsters asks the dog person if they've worked here long, and after a moment of hesitation, they just say, "I'm not sure." The mobster doesn't even question it and just says, "Oh, that's just the way it is sometimes." It's yet another weird example of someone not quite understanding where they are or what exactly is happening. Checking back in with the blonde guy, he finally collapses on the ground, saying he just needs to rest for a while, as the harpoon still sticks out of his side. As he lay down to die, the 3 cartoon characters find him. They pull the harpoon out and then use magic to turn it into a flower. They hand him the flower and send him on his way. I mean, what the fuck? He keeps walking until finally, after all this time, he finds his room. When he enters, however, the room is black, and sitting inside is the man with the pig snout. After realizing the pig man looks sad, the blonde guy hands him his flower and he begins to shed some tears. As he cries, his deformed pig minions surround him, crying as well. Meanwhile, the new director makes it to his meeting and finishes his presentation. He asks if any of the board members have questions, but as we get a look at them, it's revealed that they are all corpses. Out of one of the body's eye sockets crawls a huge centipede. It looks up at the director and they stare at each other for a moment. Then we see that the centipede has a human-like skull for a head. In fact, it looks just like the creature that was sticking out of that guy's butt earlier. I also think it looks like a weird inverted version of the hungry caterpillar, but that might just be me. It grins at the director with soulless eyes and then suddenly jumps through his head, which explodes out the back along with his brains. That was a crazy turn, I have to say. Back at the basement card game, everyone realizes they don't know what game they're playing, but they're having a good time anyway, especially the massage guy, who's happy to finally be having some social contact with his coworkers. Then the new guy walks into the room. He's taken off the snout and his eyes are back to normal. He just says nothing and sits down, grabbing some cards. We check back in with the director, or rather the director's son, and he's daydreaming again about the cartoon characters. This time they're playing a game of mini golf and enjoying some ice cream. He's snapped out of the fantasy by the voice of his father calling to him from the dark hallway. Out of the pitch black, we can see his face, and it looks kind of corpse-like. He says the board decided it's best if his son continues as CEO. The son is thankful, but questions whether he even wants to come back. Maybe it's time to try something else. His father says he and the board have full faith in him. They have new capital, new investors, and business will continue as usual. At this point, we can see the father's full body, and his skin is shriveled like many of the dead folks we've seen. Close up, in one of his eye sockets, is the centipede creature. He pokes his head out and introduces himself as the new chairman of the board, and that it's going to be great working with the director. Speaking of which, he places the director's badge back on him. He then tells him good luck and kisses him on the cheek. The director's eyes then turn white and he falls to the ground. We then see a flash of terrifying images of filth and body horror, with several abominations addressing the director. This continues on with even more frightening images and more creatures calling to him. In one image, we can see the director's eyes burning out of his head. Finally, his assistant finds him on the ground and asks if he's okay. When we fully come back to reality, the assistant is holding him in her arms, but his eyes are pure black and his skin looks burnt. Suddenly, the 3 cartoon characters show up in bathrobes and take the director's body. They whisper something in the assistant's ear, though we don't know what they say, and leave. This comic is beyond bizarre. Somewhere else in the spa, we see the woman with the harpoon has finally nailed her real target, a bizarre sea creature with 3 human heads. It's riddled with harpoons and several guests stand around it. Some of them seem to be mourning. The blonde man, clutching his wounded side, finds the exit to the spa. However, in order to reach it, he must enter a pool of water. He walks into it and finds a set of stairs going to the bottom. He walks down the steps under the black water, and along with him walk several other people who have transformed into corpses and creatures. And and on a closer look, they all seem to resemble the blonde man in some aspect. They walk by a giant disturbing mermaid, and finally the man emerges alone on the other side and exits the spa. Next, in a very strange sequence, not that this whole comic isn't strange, we see an extravagant mansion and a maid with a tray of tea. The weird thing is, the maid looks off, almost like she's a corpse. She delivers the tea to none other than the couple from the beginning of the comic, only here they're super rich. They question how expensive this place is and how they're able to afford it. They finally conclude that they must be rich and famous, as if they aren't sure. The butler, who's a deformed creature as well, says that they have a guest, and the guest is actually familiar. It's the faceless person with the weird skin we saw way back near the beginning. He undoes his robe to reveal there's a strange face on his belly. The face then crawls out of his skin and forms its own body of a woman. The couple then asks if they've done something wrong. You may remember this is exactly what they asked while in the sauna upon seeing the corpse. Shockingly, the butler and maid both pull out handguns and shoot the couple in the head. Then the faceless man starts playing piano while the maid and butler dance. In the background, we can see the stomach woman grabbing the couple's feet and dragging them away. I should point out that the woman who crawled out of the stomach's face looks a lot like the centipede. Back at the spa, everything is being put back in order and their rooms are being cleaned. The director's assistant starts her day and grabs a handbell. She enters the reception area and finds the two technicians who say they've fixed it. One of them eats a banana and they start to walk away, but then slip on the banana peel, yet another classic slapstick gag. The assistant then walks down into the employees only area, and hidden in the walls are several hideous creatures tucked away, which she pays no mind to. She then encounters a deep well in the ground and rings the bell. On the beach, the director is laying in the sand. He looks over and sees the well, which extends up to a massive structure. He then looks back toward the beach where he finds the stomach woman who tells him to hurry up, a new workday is beginning, and the guests are waiting. Soon the director comes crawling out of the well, and the assistant gives him his schedule as he heads to his office. She once again wonders if she'll ever find the right moment to tell him how she feels, and he sits down in his office, which is now completely back in order. We finally get a full shot of the massive facility from the outside, and it's huge, almost endless. In the woodlands nearby, the blonde man walks away, pausing briefly to look back. As he travels, he encounters the two mobsters who are literally burning the money they got. Then he sees a limo roll up on the nearby road where a man gets out. It's the VIP guest, only this time it's clear that it's the chef with his dark hair and mustache. The man continues walking until he eventually encounters three thugs with cartoon faces, and they surround him with deadly weapons. It then cuts to the couple entering an eroded apartment building. They take the stairs up and see a smiling man with slick backed hair and a bathrobe heading outside. You may recognize him as the very first person we saw in this comic who was attacked by the thugs. The couple acts as if they are interested in renting an apartment here. It's pretty run down, but they decide to head into an apartment and check it out. They face through the door, and outside the smiling man kneels down in the dirt, and that is Spa, ending just as it began. This may be the most surreal comic I've ever covered, including Beautiful Darkness, which was pretty vague in meaning as well. While Spa is a pretty obscure comic, there are still several theories floating around as to what it means. The most common interpretation is that Spa is a satire on the wellness industry. The spa becomes an allegory for how modern society pays for relaxation and self-care while ignoring deeper problems like corruption, alienation, decay, and existential dread that lay beneath the superficial treatments. This is the main takeaway I've seen in many of the reviews for Spa, but I want to give a bigger breakdown of all the major themes as well as my own possible interpretations. The biggest reoccurring theme, and in my opinion the most disturbing aspect of Spa, is the normalization of death and tragedy. Characters see rotting bodies, grotesque transformations, and violence, yet no one bats an eye, and they only act as if this is some minor inconvenience. As I mentioned, it really does remind me of what I found so creepy in Beautiful Darkness. Everyone going about their day to day as if nothing is wrong while major disturbing events happen. I think this kind of normalization of the absurd is terrifying, but kind of rare in media. Another theme is around identity. Characters seem to have no idea where they are or how long they've been there, and the main couple is a prime example. When they're in the shitty apartment, they wonder if they live there, and when they're in a mansion, they do the same, as well as taking a guess that they must be rich and famous. Not to mention the amount of bizarre doppelgangers seen throughout. up. Another big theme revolves around corporate rituals and power structures. The director's humiliation rituals like the pig snout and dunce cap, his succession story, and his father's eventual reappearance all parody workplace hierarchies. Even the inspection fees seem to be mob-like extortion disguised as corporate overhead. Also, the fact that the rules and status quo are more important to the business than addressing the madness that exceeds those boundaries. Then you have the fact that the story seems to loop, showcasing cycles of violence and surreal recurrence. The story begins with the three cartoon thugs attacking a man and ends with this exact scenario playing out again. The couple drifts from spa to mansion to the apartments on repeat, and the story loops back to its own beginning, suggesting an eternal cycle where horror endlessly plays out. Now, while these sophisticated sounding allegorical interpretations are interesting, I think it's a lot more fun to take a stab at this from a literal perspective. What if the spa is hell? Okay, now stay with me here, this is just for fun, but the endless spa could function as a sort of liminal zone, like the bathhouse in Spirited Away. People arrive without remembering who they are, whether they belong there, or even if they're alive. For example, this is why the couple can't decide if they live here and why guests don't know how long they've been employed. This uncertainty of identity feels like the fog of death or limbo. The black mold could represent the rot of death itself, slowly eroding both flesh and memory, eventually twisting bodies into new fucked up forms. This explains all the bizarre transformations. They're not random mutations, but stages of decay in hell. The cartoon thugs who appear at the beginning could represent demonic figures who oversee the cycle. They kill, escort, and reappear in the director's daydreams as if to remind him that this place is a machine of death. The director and his obsession with clean uniforms and good service is like a parody of Divine Judgment, where salvation isn't about morality, but about appearances. You could even take it further by looking at his father as an old god handing down eternal responsibility, the punishment being trapped forever in an endless, meaningless system. In this hell theory, the guest's indifference to corpses makes sense because they're already dead. The rotting husks are simply earlier versions of themselves, reminding them where they're headed. This is just how it works, and as the cycle repeats itself, it becomes routine. In this way, the spa is less a linear story and more of a circle of horrifying events where the dead enter, decay, and feed back into the cycle again and again. This is obviously more of a fun fan theory, but it does kind of work. Anyway, I want to know what you guys think of Spa. Is it a satire on the wellness industry? Could it be an interesting concept of hell or purgatory? Or is it just meaningless, a complete lack of narrative used as an excuse to showcase some cool horror art? Let me know in the comments below, and if you like this comic, be sure to pick up a copy at your local bookstore. Shout out to Kill Me Katie as always for the intro and outro music, which is likely playing right now. And if you want to see your art at the end of my videos, email me a submission to the address below with a name or social media handle. But I appreciate you guys watching at all. This is Grease speaking. Goodbye, friends. Carol Ann wanted a perfect wedding, a perfect husband, and a perfect family, but her desire to control the uncontrollable becomes her undoing. What starts off as a cute love story quickly turns into a body horror nightmare. As Carol Ann continues to hit setbacks on her way to a perfect life, she develops an unhealthy habit to deal with the stress. And as her life spirals into disarray, this form of relief turns into a sickening mutilation. Despite reading dozens of horror comics, even I found this one hard to stomach at times. Don't let the cute art style fool you. This comic is not for the faint of heart. This is tender. Hello friends, this is Grease speaking, and today we're looking at Tender by Beth Hetland. It's short and sweet, if by sweet you mean jam-packed with tragedy and cringeworthy body horror. This is another comic I kind of found by accident. I think I saw it mentioned on Reddit or something, and I was surprised to find that it hadn't gotten much attention, even for the disturbing aspects alone. Part of why I found this story so compelling and hard to put down is that it starts off so lighthearted and innocent. You think you're gonna get a typical slice of life, meet cute story, only to be pulled into a spiral of depravity and terror. The characters and situations feel real and touch on issues that people deal with every day, so when things are taken to the extreme, it's painfully visceral. I should warn you, Tinder deals with some difficult subject matter as well as some pretty extreme gore at times, so fair warning, this one's a doozy. But without further ado, let's get into it. This is Tinder Explained. Tinder begins at the end of the story. A disheveled, scrawny woman sits alone in an apartment building, singing ominously to her pregnant belly. It's really off-putting for some reason, and trust me, it's actually way more disturbing than you could imagine once you get the full backstory. So let's jump backwards a bit. Carol Ann and her husband Lee are trying for a baby when the day finally comes that they get a positive pregnancy test. Carol Ann is ecstatic and can't stop watching the likes go up on her announcement post. We fast forward to the end of her pregnancy, and Carol Ann is happy to quit her job, anticipating the life of a stay-at-home mom. Her boss tries to convince her to come back after maternity leave, but she's got her mind set, and he congratulates her. Lee helps carry her things from the office as they take the train home. Along the way, Carol Ann points out all the things she's not going to miss about her daily commute. When they get back to their apartment, Lee asks what's for dinner, and Carol Ann picks up the cat before playfully declaring cat loaf. This seems like a fun little exchange, but it's actually really disturbing foreshadowing for what's to come. Carol Ann starts to make dinner, and while most of this comic is drawn in shades of blue, meat, flesh, and blood are shown red. The contrast makes even this steak look freaky. Now, up to this point, this comic seems like a wholesome slice of life until you get to this page, when we're hit with a nightmare scene. It's a mashup of images full of pain and destruction, like dilapidated buildings, a bug crawling out of another bug in a bloody mess, and worst of all, get ready to cringe, Carol Ann has a hangnail and starts pulling on it. Not only does it pull some of the skin from the end of her finger, she just keeps pulling until a long strip of skin tears off down her hand. These three images managed to freak me out more than most horror manga I've read. It's detailed and disgusting. Luckily, this is just a dream, and Carol Ann wakes up crying. Yeah, I would too. Lee comforts her before heading off to work and congratulates her on her first day as a stay-at-home mom. In a charming montage, Carol Ann does some cleaning and sets up the nursery, preparing the apartment for their new arrival. The days go by, and it starts to feel a little like Groundhog Day while Carol Ann waits for the baby. She stops for a moment and looks at her and Lee's wedding photo. This leads to a flashback where we learn how the couple met. Living alone, a younger Carol Ann scrolls through Instagram, envious of her friends who are all getting engaged, married, and having kids. She tells the cat that one day she'll have all of this too, and it won't just be the two of them anymore. At work, Carol Ann's co-worker Taylor makes fun of her for her strange lunch, where she buys multiple sandwiches and combines the different meats into a Frankenwich. Then, while she should be working, Carol Ann scrolls on Facebook and secretly prints some images off. Back at her apartment, we can see what she was up to, cutting the heads off of some marriage photos and replacing them with her and her office crush, Lee. I'm all for arts and crafts, but that's a little creepy. The next day, while she eats her monstrosity of a sandwich, Taylor brags about going out of town for the weekend with her boyfriend. Carol Ann notices Lee in the next room and zones out completely. At her desk, she writes his name over and over again like a high school girl. Turns out he works in the cubicle next to hers, and she waits patiently for him to leave so that she can accidentally run into him on the elevator. They exchange a glance, and Carol Ann blushes. Outside, it's raining heavily, and Carol Ann doesn't have an umbrella. Luckily, Lee does, and he walks her to the train sharing his. They have a pleasant conversation up until Lee gets to a stop, and despite being soaked, Carol Ann is smiling ear to ear. Unfortunately, we're hit with another insane nightmare sequence. Once again, there are various disturbing images. Carol Ann is trapped in a cavern. She starts coughing and finds a clump of hair on her tongue. Then she pulls a massive fur ball out of her throat and spits it onto the ground in a puddle of blood. Jesus. At the same time, the cavern is filled with hair, and Carol Ann finds her shadow in a pool of water, which she smashes with a rock. We also see where the fur came from as she licks her cat furiously. In the final image, Carol Ann lay dead with her actual face smashed in with the rock that she threw. It's absolutely bizarre and terrifying, but it does a great job of feeling like a real nightmare. Carol Ann wakes up from this horror, and while real life isn't as disturbing, we do get kind of a creepy and sad sequence. After waking up, Carol Ann immediately scrolls on Instagram and afterwards looks at herself in the mirror saying, "Congratulations congratulations over and over as if she's rehearsing it. Although, as she does, she begins to cry. She continues this while she takes a shower, and it's really off-putting. Well, we find out why she's doing this at work. Apparently, when her office friend Taylor went off on that trip with her boyfriend, he proposed, and Carol Ann was rehearsing her congratulations. It's clear that in reality, she's extremely envious. As she walks back to her cubicle, she begins to bite her nail until it tears off, leaving her finger bloody. Then, it's pretty gross, but she chews on the nail and swallows it. After her shift, Carol Ann runs into Lee in the elevator again, and it seems like he's just as into her as she is him. Before they leave the building, Lee nervously asks her if she'd like to get a drink sometime, and they exchange numbers. Jumping ahead, it's date night, and Carol Ann puts on her best lipstick and black dress. Dinner with Lee goes really well. They hit it off and afterwards go on a romantic walk, eventually ending up back at Carol Ann's place. They hook up, and then there's kind of a creepy shot of Carol Ann just standing naked by the bed staring at Lee, Paranormal Activity style. After a few dates, Carol Ann and Lee are officially an item. At lunch, Taylor can't stop talking about the upcoming wedding, and you can tell it bothers Carol Ann as she breaks her sandwich up into small pieces. The months go on, and in a montage we can see the progression of Carol Ann and Lee's relationship through the seasons until finally the day of Taylor's wedding comes. After the bride and groom's first dance, the floor opens up. While they dance, Carol Ann won't stop staring at the bride and making comments about how happy she looks and that she should be so lucky. It's a little pointed, and Lee gets annoyed, walking off the dance floor to have a drink. Carol Ann is pissed and chastises him for ditching her in front of everyone. They get into a big fight while the bride and groom cut the cake, and Lee wonders where this wedding obsession came from. Later in the bathroom, Carol Ann pulls on her hair out of frustration and, in a pretty gruesome sequence, rips a chunk of hair from the side of her head. Then, with skin still attached to the end of it, she puts it in her mouth. I rarely get close to gagging when reading comics, but for some reason this one really gets me. And trust me, it just keeps getting worse. It seems like Carol Ann has some sort of autophagia disorder, injuring and consuming parts of her own body to relieve stress. She comes back from the bathroom in a better mood and asks Lee if he wants to head back to her place. Back at home, Carol Ann sits in bed and starts pulling on the dry skin on her heel. Eventually, she peels some off, and it tears into her foot a little as we can see a dark, bloody spot underneath. Lee comes back to bed and falls asleep while Carol Ann lays in the dark looking at Taylor's wedding photos on Instagram. She then quietly pulls the loose skin from her foot and starts eating it. Ugh. In another time jump, we see Carol Ann and Lee moving into an apartment together. Carol Ann gets dressed up for a brunch date with her girlfriends, and on the train ride over, she starts biting her finger again, giving her another gnarly hangnail. She shows up a little late and finds the girls a few drinks deep. Soon, the conversation turns to Taylor and how married life is. Carol Ann tunes out and looks down at her hand, imagining an engagement ring on her finger. Then she hides her steak knife in her pocket and heads off to the bathroom. We don't see exactly what happens other than blood going down the drain and Carol Ann clearly doing something with the knife. Yeah, I don't know if I want to see what she was doing. In another jump, it's now the night before Carol Ann and Lee's wedding. I guess he finally popped the question. After Lee goes to sleep, Carol Ann reaches into the back of the closet to grab the weird book she made all that time ago, where she glued her and Lee's heads onto a married couple. She takes it up to the roof of her building and burns it in a pot. It's a really creepy scene. Well, the wedding and reception go off without a hitch, and it truly is a perfect day. When they get back home, Carol Ann tells Lee to keep his jacket on. She wants to take some photos to post on Instagram so she can get that sweet dopamine hit she's been wishing for so long. We move ahead in the timeline quite a ways here, and let me warn you, this second half of Tinder is not for the faint of heart. At the hospital, it seems Carol Ann has just given birth to her baby, and the nurse leaves her and Lee for a moment alone. But something's off here. Lee looks mortified. Carol Ann says the baby is perfect and has his eyes, but he refuses to come over, saying he just can't do it. Carol Ann begs him with tears running down her cheeks, saying she needs her papa. At these words, Lee loses it and tells her that that is enough. You can tell he regrets raising his voice, and Carol Ann breaks down, saying she's still our baby. Lee tells her that it was their baby. If you hadn't put it together yet, it's a stillborn. The baby Carol Ann wants her husband to hold so badly is dead. Yeah, so not only does this comic have some gut-wrenching body horror, but it also has to throw this at us too. In another montage, the couple leave the hospital and try to move on with life. Lee slowly adjusts back to his normal self, while Carol Ann has a hard time getting out of utter depression. In another nightmare sequence, Carol Ann walks through a field. She looks down at her pregnant belly when it suddenly deflates and she begins to puke up a swarm of locusts. She wakes up early the next morning and makes some breakfast. therapist. It seems like she's actually in a pretty good mood. She wakes up Lee and says that it's been 90 days, so now they can start trying to get pregnant again. Lee is a little less than enthused on the proposition and asks if they can wait until after work. He heads off for the day and leaves Carol Ann to stew over his lackluster response. She starts cleaning the house in a pissed off mood and eventually makes dinner. There's kind of an eerie panel of her untying a questionable looking package of meat, and then she just stands still for an inordinate amount of time, once again reminding me of Paranormal Activity. Lee comes home from work and just tells her, "Let's be quick, I don't want to miss kickoff." Wow, what a charmer. As promised, Lee makes quick work of their lovemaking session and hurries off to watch football. Carol Ann drifts off to sleep and has another nightmare. She's running down a hallway chasing a bird. The bird won't stop running into walls, breaking its wing and causing blood to run from its beak until eventually it falls to the floor at her feet in a bloody mess of feathers. She wakes up in the middle of the night and makes her way into the kitchen, where she pulls the leftovers from the fridge and starts furiously eating the meat with her bare hands. Her cat stares at her while she does this, and she just gives it a dirty look as if she feels judged. The next day, Carol Ann says that they should try again tonight, and averting his eyes, Lee agrees. Once again, Carol Ann stands motionless in the apartment until it's late at night and Lee still hasn't come home, so she finally goes to sleep. Lee shows up and sneaks into bed, but Carol Ann's actually wide awake and asks him where he was. After a long silence, Lee says he doesn't want to do this anymore. If something went wrong, he just can't bear to go through it again. Carol Ann doesn't answer, and he thinks she must be sleeping, so she's wide awake and stewing over what he said. The next morning, Lee apologizes for coming home late and says that they could try again tonight, but Carol Ann angrily says there's no point, she's not ovulating. She gives him the cold shoulder as he heads out the door. It cuts to some unsettling images of Carol Ann using a meat grinder to make sausages, and the use of red coloring here makes it way creepier than it needs to be. Even weirder, she starts to eat some of the raw meat. Whoa. Later, Carol Ann stops at the store to pick up a pregnancy test, which comes back negative. She looks down at the results and then eerily looks into the bathroom mirror, faking a smile as tears roll down her cheeks. Lee comes home and Carol Ann presents a delicious looking dinner, but Lee says that they need to talk. He sits her down and tells her that he's been privately seeing a therapist and says that he knows she really wants to have another baby, but he just doesn't think he can after what they went through. He doesn't think he'll ever be able to. They both want different things, and he thinks ultimately this isn't going to work. So in a sad montage, we see Lee moving out and signing divorce papers, leaving Carol Ann alone with the cat, back to having none of the things she'd hoped for all those years ago. She feeds the cat some food, and watching it eat the meat for some reason pisses her off. She picks up the cat and starts petting it. Tears well up in her eyes and she starts to look angry. At the same time, she starts getting a little too aggressive with the cat, petting it way too hard. Some time passes and Carol Ann sits in silence in the living room. A fly buzzes by her and she smashes it before putting it in her mouth and eating it. We can also see that her hand has band-aids all over it and she has multiple tears around her fingers, likely from chewing on them. She gets a text from her group of gal pals who all want to meet up again, and we're hit with yet another nightmare sequence. This one is full of all kinds of weird and disturbing images that are kind of hard to explain. There's some smashed bugs, a dead baby bird, and some weird body horror, like Carol Ann's mouth fusing together and eventually her ripping off her own face. There's a lot going on here, and you could spend a while just examining these pages. At the get-together, the girls speculate on what's going on between Lee and Carol Ann before she shows up looking not so great. They're immediately taken aback by the multiple bandages covering her hands. Seems like things have escalated. She just tells them that she accidentally burnt her hand in the kitchen, and one of her friends is clearly skeptical, saying that they don't look like burns, but they change the subject and ask why they haven't heard from her in so long, clearly trying to bait her into telling them what happened with Lee. She gives in and says that this is as good a time as any to tell them she's pregnant. The girls congratulate her, except for the skeptical one, who senses that something might be wrong. She tells Carol Ann about her OBGYN and suggests that she go get it confirmed. Later, Carol Ann goes to the doctor her friend recommended. Despite claiming that she had several positive at-home pregnancy tests and not having a menstruation period for 3 months, the doctor regretfully informs her that she isn't pregnant. She says that she'd like to do some more tests because the missing menstruation may be a signal from her body that something something is really wrong. Carol Ann anxiously bites her fingers over the news and heads back home. When she gets there, she opens up a drawer full of pregnancy tests, all of which are negative. But Carol Ann gets out a Sharpie and starts marking the lines, changing them to positive obsessively. So Carol Ann never had a positive test to begin with, and this confirms that she is completely delusional. She makes herself dinner by heating up a strange looking slab of meat with a slice of cheese on top. And as she bites it, there's a weird crunching noise and she keeps reaching in her mouth to pull something out. At the same time, her friend calls her and Carol Ann tells her that the doctor confirmed it, she's 12 weeks pregnant. On her plate, we can see what she was pulling out of her mouth. It looks like small bits of bone or teeth or something. I don't know if this is her teeth or bones from something that she cooked up, but it's making my skin crawl and I haven't seen the cat in a little while. Some time passes and Carol Ann enters her apartment to find a surprise party waiting for her. Her friends put together a baby shower, and now that we can see her in the light, Carol Ann isn't looking too hot. She looks emaciated with sunken eyes and cheeks. However, she does look pregnant, which is confusing and a little disturbing at this point. The girls mention that they got in using a spare key Lee gave them ages ago, and they also wonder where her cat is. They haven't seen him around the apartment. Her friends are pretty concerned about her and urge her to eat something. Carol Ann just breaks down crying, and her friends try to comfort her. It's clear that they found out what happened with Lee and say fuck him. Looking at all the gifts, Carol Ann says that this is all way too much, but her friend Taylor says they really wanted to spoil this one. A demented Carol Ann gives her a look and says, "What do you mean this one?" instantly making the room quiet and awkward. And soon after, they all file out. As they leave, Carol Ann says she's so lucky that her firstborn will be so loved. As she comes back inside, her stomach growls and she takes a bunch of pictures of the decorations to post online. She looks at one of the balloons and sees her reflection, which prompts her to violently squeeze it until it pops, and then she pops all the other balloons in succession. After cleaning up, Carol Ann walks into the kitchen and starts heating up a skillet. Then she walks into the bedroom and changes into a bathrobe. It's here that we see something truly awful. There are huge chunks of flesh missing from her legs. She places a chair in front of the stove and sits down. Then, in a truly horrifying and revolting scene, she then ties off one of her cut up legs to numb it, and using a kitchen knife, slices almost the entire back half of her leg off and plops it onto a plate. She then takes the hot cast iron skillet and uses it to cauterize the massive wound before placing it on the stove and cooking up her own flesh with butter. As she does, she pats her belly, telling herself to stay strong for the baby and trying not to lose consciousness. Next, she sits at the table and proceeds to eat her own leg. After finishing up the entire slab of bloody flesh, she looks down at her grotesque bulging stomach and asks if that was yummy, saying, "Mommy will always take care of you." She then sits in her rocking chair by the window and starts singing, bringing us back to the very first few panels and ending where we began. I have to say, I have covered a lot of horror comics and some pretty messed up stuff, but for some reason the body horror in Tinder makes me very squeamish. Maybe that's because for the most part, it feels very close to reality. It's easy to imagine it vividly and it's just so visceral. I really didn't know what I was getting into with this one. I heard it had some horror elements, but I didn't expect the utter tragedy that would unfold. While it's pretty self-explanatory, it might be worth noting some of the themes here like envy, expectation versus reality, and the harms of social media. Carol Ann idealizes her perfect life of getting married and having children, but sometimes she tries to force this ideal onto reality and cares a lot about how she's perceived online and to her friends. One panel that I think subtly showcases her obsession with presentation is when she makes breakfast for Lee early in the morning and waits way too long with coffee in a mug until he walks around the corner. Also, she can paint the picturesque image of a wife grabbing her husband a cup of joe in the morning. Now, there's obviously nothing wrong with trying to realize your goals, but Carol Ann shuts down when the reality isn't matching the ideal. Societal expectations weigh very heavily on her. As a result, she carries around these shortcomings with resentment and stress that she relieves through autophagia. As the setbacks of life come one after another, reliance on this stress relief culminates in a sickening way. At least that's my take. Now, the hoity-toity analyzing of underlying themes is fun and all, but a more literal question is, what's wrong with her stomach at the end? I mean, she can't actually be pregnant, right? It implied that she ate the cat, but is that why it's bulging like that? Or is it just the fact that auto-cannibalism must be terrible for digestion? Anyway, what do you guys think? Were you as skeeved out as I was? Let me know in the comments, and please support the author Beth Hetland by picking up a copy of Tinder at your local bookstore or comic book shop. Shout out to Kill Me Katie as always for the intro and outro music, which is likely playing right now, and if you want to see your art at the end of my videos, email me a submission to the address below with a name or social media handle. But I appreciate you guys watching at all. This is Grease speaking. Goodbye, friends. Anya is a high school girl and Russian immigrant who is chock full of insecurities and struggling to fit in. Everything changes one day when she falls into a deep well and finds herself trapped along with some skeletal remains and their ghost. Anya befriends this ghost, a girl her age who died 100 years ago. After escaping the well, Anya's life improves drastically with the help of her new pal. That is, until the ghost girl starts getting a little too controlling and obsessive about Anya's love life. This is a charming and spooky coming of age story until things take a dark turn. This is Anya's Ghost. Hello friends, this is Grief speaking, and this week we're going to be going through Anya's Ghost. This comic is not really a horror comic, and it's not even that scary, but it is one of those comics that just seems unavoidable. Not only is it loved by critics and comic book lovers alike, but I've gotten dozens of comments and even some emails requesting that I cover it. So while it's not as disturbing as some of the usual twisted stuff I cover, it does have a ghost, and that's close enough to horror for me. Honestly, this is just a great story. Sometimes it's hilarious, sometimes it's heart-wrenching, and it does have its fair share of spooky moments as well. So without further ado, let's get into it. This is Anya's Ghost Explained. Anya walks into the kitchen in the morning to find her mother making syrniki, a traditional Russian pancake-like dish. Sounds pretty good to me, but Anya thinks they're too greasy and would prefer something low-fat. There's a funny exchange where her mother says there's nothing wrong with being a little fat. Back in Russia, being fat meant you were a rich man. And Anya says, yeah, I don't think American boys really go for girls that look like rich men. She heads off to school, and when she arrives at the bus stop, she sees a cute guy waving her direction. She waves back until she realizes that he wasn't waving at her, he was waving at his girlfriend, a tall blonde. Anya's obviously embarrassed, and her friend Shobin makes it worse by asking her why she's not walking with her boyfriend today. She's referring to a nerdy kid named Dima who's also from Russia. Anya's clearly annoyed, and Shobin asks if she can bum a cigarette from her. They get into a little tiff when Anya refuses, and Shobin storms off. At the same time, Anya's crush and his girlfriend start making out, and the whole situation just pisses her off. Instead of taking the bus to school, she storms off into a nearby park, stewing on all the irritations of the day. Her mother's cooking, Shobin's pestering, and the kissing couple. She's clearly distracted and accidentally walks into a large hole in the ground. It's surprisingly deep, and next thing she knows, she hits the bottom with a thud. She's alright for the most part, other than a sprained wrist, but it seems that she's fallen into a deep well. She lights a match to get a look around and finds a skeleton just a few feet from her. After a moment of shock, she starts screaming at the top of her lungs, but no one's around to hear her. Stressed out, she stops for a minute to have a smoke. As she puffs away, she suddenly sees something through the haze. A translucent girl sitting on the nearby bones. Anya asks if she's been down here the whole time, and the ghost says, in a manner of speaking, she has been down here the whole time, and quite a bit of other time as well. Well, that's a funny way to put it. Anya realizes she's speaking to a ghost and goes into a full panic, assuming there's some kind of gas down here causing her to hallucinate. The ghost says she doesn't think so. She was down here a long time before she died and didn't hallucinate anything. Anya just starts screaming again for help, to no avail. Finally, she asks the girl how long she's been down here. We learn that she fell down the well 90 years ago, but no one ever found her. She could hear them calling for her above, but couldn't reply because, as she puts it, she landed wrong. Looking at her skeleton, it's apparent that she broke her neck on the fall, and although she was conscious, she couldn't move or speak. Well, that's a disturbing way to go. Anya remembers she had food packed in her bag and hopes it'll be enough to last till she can escape. The girl asks her to stay a while. There hasn't been anyone but her for so long, and she would finally have someone to talk to. But Anya plans on getting the hell out of here as soon as someone walks through the area. She tries screaming out again, but nothing. After a while, she can see the night sky above, and it's gotten a little chilly. The ghost asks her about her clothes and whether everyone dresses that way now. Anya then gets an idea. Maybe the ghost could fly up out of the well and get someone's attention, but I guess her spirit can't go very far from her bones. Anya has another cigarette and seems to be losing hope. The next day, a punk comes waltzing through the area and throws a soda can down the well. The ghost notices this and wakes Anya up, telling her to yell. She cries out just in time to get the guy's attention before he gets too far away. He looks into the hole and Anya tells him to please go get some help and that she's hurt. The guy can't see her clearly and asks if she's a hot chick because she sounds kinda hot. Anya looks beyond annoyed and replies that she's incredibly hot, he can't even imagine. This puts some pep in his step and he runs off to get some help. Anya starts gathering her stuff, excited to finally get out of here. She looks over to see that the ghost looks pretty sad. Anya's like, look, I'm not gonna solve your murder or whatever so you can rest in peace. That's not my scene, but I'll make sure someone buries your bones or something. Just then, the punk returns with a couple of friends and a rope. Anya ties it around her waist and the guys start pulling her out. As she ascends, she looks down at the sad ghost girl looking up at her. We skip ahead a couple of days and Anya is pleading with her mother to let her stay home from school one more day on account of her sprained wrist. But remember, this is a tough chick from the old country. She tells Anya she's going and reminds her that she's left-handed, so she'll be fine. Anya stomps up to her room, rudely ignoring her little brother along the way. She thumps her head into her pillow and before she knows it, it's morning. She arrives at school in a bad mood already, and it's made worse when she realizes her first class is economics, which she finds boring as all hell. As she falls asleep in class, Shobin peeks up through the window and convinces her to come have a smoke with her. She sneaks out the window and they go to the women's room. Shobin asks her how awesome it was being trapped in the well, and Anya explains why it wasn't awesome at all, mainly because of the skeleton sitting next to her. Of course, Shobin thinks that's even cooler and suggests that maybe the well was haunted. Anya looks uncomfortable and dismisses the idea, remembering the very real ghost she encountered. Shobin has to head back to class and Anya finishes her cigarette. She looks at herself in the mirror and hopes she doesn't end up looking like her mom when she's older. In the reflection, she notices something peeking up from behind the stall. It's none other than the ghost. After a bit of a scare, Anya asks her what we're all wondering. How did she leave the well? Well, if you remember, she has to be near her bones, and I guess Anya accidentally put one in her bag. She looks around and finds that, yep, she was carrying around the ghost's pinky finger in her bag this whole time. The ghost girl's pretty hyped on finally getting out of the well, but Anya's not so pleased. She doesn't want a ghost following her around high school. Just then, the bell rings, and Anya remembers that she has a big biology test today, and she didn't bother studying for it because she was hoping she'd still be home. In a rush, she tells the ghost to hide in her bag and heads to class. After the test starts, the ghost floats out of Anya's bag, though she's really small, and at the side of her, Anya stands up and slaps her hand over her, which draws the attention of the entire class. She just plays it off like she was killing a bug. After she sits back down, the ghost starts talking to her, but Anya is pissed and demands she get back in the bag. This commotion is noticed once again by the teacher, who tells her to try and remember her notes in her head rather than out loud. On top of that, the teacher can't quite pronounce her last name, Borzakovskaya, which embarrasses her even more. After this, she finally gets to the test and she's screwed. While she struggles to answer, the tiny ghost girl floats around, covertly looking at some of the other students' papers. She then relays what she saw to Anya. For the first time, Anya's actually glad to have a ghost in her bag, and with the Phantom's help, she finishes the test easily. The nerdy kid, Dima, announces to the teacher that he finished early and would help collect papers if she needed it. All the other kids look annoyed at him, and Anya says he's gonna get pounded later. It cuts ahead, and sure enough, Dima is getting bullied at lunch. The ghost girl points out that Dima and Anya are both Russian, so why isn't Anya backing him up? In her time, your people stuck together and defended each other. Anya tells her times have changed. If you act like a fobby creep, you get creamed. She explains to the ghost that fobby is short for fresh off the boat. All of a sudden, Shobin runs into the lunchroom and informs Anya that it's bleep test day in gym. They usually try and skip the bleep test, but they were caught. The gym teacher reminds everyone how it works. They run back and forth across the gym in time to a sound or bleep. The bleeps get faster, and so you must run faster until you reach your physical limit. Anya thinks the gym teacher just likes watching them run around in skirts. She looks over at the apparently perfect Elizabeth, the blonde we saw earlier, jealous of how well she does in gym. Anya and another girl come up with a plan to pretend to fall halfway through the test, and as they plan, Elizabeth's boyfriend Sean, Anya's crush, comes into the gym to watch, making the whole situation much worse. The buzzer sounds and they all take off. Anya's friend sticks to the plan and falls to the ground, but probably because of Sean watching, Anya keeps on running. She actually does pretty well well, outrunning some of the other girls, but she gets distracted looking at Sean and trips on her own 2 feet, falling face first into the floor. Even worse, her butt is sticking up in the air and everyone can see her underwear. Elizabeth stops to help her up and Anya is mortified. Afterwards, she changes in the locker room and the ghost girl asks her if there was something she could have done to help. Unfortunately, you can't cheat at gym. While they talk, Sean comes out from behind her and surprisingly starts up a friendly conversation. Assuming it was fake, he tells her that fall she took was bitchin'. They introduce themselves properly, although Anya is still embarrassed of her long-ass Russian surname and calls herself Anya Brown instead. Then Elizabeth shows up and her and Sean walk off together. On the bus home, a girl says, "Hey Anya, I heard about your nice moves in gym today." But Shobin backs up her friend and says, "Hey Katie, I heard about your nice moves in the boys' bathroom today." Nice. Lost in thought about her interaction with Sean, Anya passes the park on the way home, forgetting to bring the ghost bone back to the well. Back at home, Anya's mom is about to take the US citizenship test and needs help being quizzed. It's a pretty fun scene that I can't do justice explaining, but her mother thinks Ben Franklin was a president. Later, upstairs, Anya's chilling out listening to music when the ghost girl comes out and asks her if it's okay if she stays a little longer, even offering to keep helping her at school. After a moment of thought, Anya agrees. She has finals coming up after all. The ghost gets super excited to see more of this future world. The next day of school, Anya describes with one sentence: ghosts are awesome. The ghost helps her cheat on another test, keeps watch while Anya has a smoke, and even gets into the school files to figure out Sean's schedule for stalking purposes. Having a ghost pal isn't too shabby, it seems. Anya says how great it is having the ghost around when she's interrupted by Dima in the hall. He wonders if she'll be in church on Sunday since he hasn't seen her in 3 months. And she says maybe. After this interaction, she chats with the ghost again, only to be interrupted this time by Shobin, who wonders who she's talking to. She pretends she was just on the phone and they walk home together after school. Anya's on the lookout for Sean and Shobin catches her acting weird, so Anya tells her about the crush. Shobin ribs her for a bit, saying he's the type of guy you're supposed to have a crush on in a bad teen movie. Back at home, Anya finds that her necklace was buried in the yard by her brother. She storms in the house cussing about it and her mother says don't swear in front of Jesus. Behind her on the wall, we can see one of the classic Orthodox icons, although cartoonified. Up in her room, Anya's pissed off, ranting about her annoying brother, and the ghost says back in her day, children who misbehaved got beaten by canes. Anya thanks her for all the help today, and the ghost asks her more about Sean, wondering if she loves him. She says not really, but he is cute. The ghost then says that she was in love once. She explains that she was going to get married, but he had to go to war and was killed in a German raid. Anya feels bad for being kind of a jerk to the ghost and realizes she doesn't even know her name. So we finally learn that her name is Emily Riley, which is nice because I don't have to keep calling her Ghost Girl. Anya asks her how she ended up in the well in the first place, and Emily tells her she was murdered. Her parents and her lived in a farmhouse not too far from the woods. They were generous, religious people who would offer a bed in the barn to anyone passing through the area. A man came in the spring who seemed like a good Christian, but one night Emily woke up and came downstairs to find that he had murdered her parents. She screamed and ran through the woods as the killer pursued her, but right before he caught her, she fell down the well, and she doesn't think he was ever caught. Anya says that that might be the saddest thing she's ever heard, and offers to help solve her murder by finding out what happened to the guy. That way, she might be able to rest in peace. The next morning, Anya's brother wakes her up for church, but she ignores him. Next, her mother comes in and says everyone's worried about her. Obviously making up an excuse, she tells her mom that she just got her period, and whether she believes it or not, her mother leaves without her. Once they head out, Anya gets up excited and takes Emily on a walk. She asks Anya why she didn't want to go to church, and she says that she wouldn't mind it so much if it was a normal church, but Orthodox church is weird. Long, boring, and full of Russians, including Dima. She says that her mother wants her and Dima to be best friends. His mom convinced Anya's to send her to the same prep school so he'd have a friend. Kinda sad, actually. Well, Anya says it's not fair. She got bullied for years for talking funny, but she worked hard to lose her accent. School's hard enough without Dima hanging around her like a handicap. Emily tells her that as far as she's concerned, Anya seems to fit in pretty well overall. It is way more interesting than Elizabeth. Later, Emily looks through some modern teen magazines and is shocked at what the girls are wearing. Of course, Anya has to turn the pages for her since she can't physically touch things, and asks Emily what she's learned about the world so far. She says that there's a serious and ongoing crisis in the Middle East and that her body type is a ruler. Yeah, she's definitely got a variety of source material. Then Anya shows her something she's been working on. She's made Emily's pinky bone into a necklace so she doesn't have to shove her into a bag. The next day at school, Shobin can't figure out how Anya knew exactly the right way to sneak off and have a smoke, avoiding the headmaster. This is because Emily can keep keep a lookout. They spot Elizabeth looking perfect as always, and Anya talks about how much she hates her, mostly because she happens to be dating Anya's dream boy. Shobin doesn't understand what she sees in Sean and says that her brother told her he was kind of a dirtbag. Anya gets defensive and snippy with her and says that she wants encouragement from friends instead of them making her feel like crap. Shobin points out she's just trying to make sure she doesn't get hurt, but they blow up at each other and Anya storms off. As she walks away in a huff, she bumps into Sean. They start an awkward conversation. Meanwhile, Emily sneaks into his backpack and finds a flyer for a party. She tells Anya to mention it and pretend she knows the guy throwing it. Next, Emily has Anya ask Sean for a ride. He agrees, saying him and Elizabeth will pick her up. After this, Anya tells Emily she's the best friend in the world. Later, after a daydream about Sean, Anya is freaking out about what to wear to the party. Emily picks an outfit for her, but it's a little skimpy for Anya's taste. Emily says, "You want Sean to notice you, don't you? So wear it." Man, she's getting really pushy. Sean and Elizabeth show up and she sneaks out to their car. They roll up to the party and Anya is quickly feeling a little out of place. Some random guy starts talking to her and then, like a creep, he tells her boobs look good in her shirt. After a while of sitting around by herself, she tracks down Elizabeth, who seems like she's standing guard outside of a door. Anya asks her where Sean is and she says that he's helping his friend Preston, who's had too much to drink. The only thing is, Preston was just downstairs. In fact, it's the same guy who made the lewd comment. Sean hears them talking and comes out from inside, telling Anya how much he likes her shirt. She asks him how Preston is and he looks confused. After some audible giggles coming from the room, it's clear that there's a girl in there, and it's someone else's girlfriend. Sean finally cuts the act and admits that he does have a girl in the room, and then this sleazebag asks Anya to join them. This is on top of the fact that his girlfriend Elizabeth is listening to all of this. Anya rejects him and he tells her, well, she knows where to find him, then goes back inside, asking Elizabeth for more of a heads up next time. After an awkward silence, Anya can't help but ask why she would go along with this, and Elizabeth says that they've been together for 3 years. She loves him. Sure, he gets bad at parties sometimes, but at the end of the day, she's his girlfriend. Geez, not only was Shobin right about Sean, but apparently the perfect Elizabeth is all kinds of up. Anya leaves the party and starts walking home when Emily comes out and confronts her, asking her what the hell is wrong with her. She can't wrap her head around why Anya would leave when she was that close to Sean. Anya points out that Sean is a total creep, plus there was another girl in the room. Why would she stay? Emily looks pissed off, saying that Anya could have gotten rid of the girl. All of her hard work is now ruined. Anya wonders what exactly she wants from all this, and Emily says she just wants her to be happy. She's in love with Sean, she should be with him. She continues saying she knows what it's like to love someone and then lose them. Anya reminds her that Sean isn't dead in World War I. He's upstairs making out with a girl, and there's a big difference. It's getting late and they just head home after this. Anya wakes up the next morning and finds that Emily's hair is different. It's less disheveled and looks neatly brushed. Emily starts immediately picking out an outfit for Anya to go see Sean in. Anya asks her why would she want to do that, and Emily gets frustrated, saying so he doesn't forget about you. She says again that Anya and Sean are in love and that they're going to be together forever. Right, it seems like Emily may be living vicariously through Anya, and it's gotten a little out of hand. She says that without her, Anya would still be that weird girl who fell on her ass at gym. Anya is understandably weirded out by Emily's behavior, but just changes the subject, suggesting that today they get to work on solving Emily's murder. However, Emily says she doesn't want to yet. She's finally making progress getting what they want, and imagine how great college will be. The next day, Anya gets ready for school and covertly leaves the bone necklace behind. As she walks out of her bedroom door, Emily confronts her about leaving it, and she's smoking a ghost cigarette? Weird. Anya says she just thought she'd go alone today. She needs to get some studying done anyway. She heads out and Emily doesn't look too happy. Instead of going to school, Anya takes a bus downtown to the public library to try and find out what happened to Emily and her killer. She tells the librarian she's doing a report and is looking for info on the town around the First World War. The lady points out the periodicals and she finds dozens of shelves full of newspapers, making her wish she could just use Google for this. Turns out that Dima is nearby and offers to help her. I guess he's allowed to come here instead of gym class because the other kids kept breaking his glasses and he can't afford to keep fixing them. Well, that's sad. He asks Anya if she's tried microfilm and she has no idea what he's talking about. So Dima shows her how it works and the two get to searching. She tells Dima to look for anything about an Emily Riley and murders in the spring of 1918. While they look, Dima opens up to Anya, asking her how it's so easy for her to fit in, considering that he's constantly harassed. At first, Anya basically says, tough luck, you're a nerdy foreign kid. But she feels bad immediately and tries to relate to him, telling him about how she was bullied too when she first got here. Dima can't believe it because he thinks she's so cool. She tells him not to worry about the bullies anyway. Impressing a bunch of snooty teenagers is a lame goal. Look at that smile on Dima's face. It's a sweet moment, you have to admit. After a while, Dima does find something regarding Emily Riley, but it's not about her being murdered, it's about her being a murderer. Anya takes a look and sure enough, she sees Emily's disturbed picture with the headline, "Local girl missing after double murder." Next to it are two more photos of a young man and woman. As Anya reads more, we get a flashback showing what really happened to Emily. We can see her peering through a window at the man and woman who are clearly in love. With tears in her eyes, she blocks the door and throws a match into the nearby grass, lighting the house on fire and burning the couple alive inside. A mob forms and searches everywhere for her. After reading about all of this, Anya is in shock. Emily had lied about everything. She decides she's gonna have to go and heads back home in a huff. She enters her room and finds that the bone is missing. Emily appears smoking again and looking demented, and Anya asks her if she's seen the necklace. Emily says maybe you should have worn it, then you wouldn't have lost it. After a heated exchange, Anya almost confronts Emily about what she learned, but Emily cuts her off to show her a new trick. She reaches down and manages to pick up an earring on Anya's desk. It appears that with some effort, Emily can now move things. Anya realizes that Emily must have hidden the necklace, and Emily even implies that she put the bone in Anya's bag to begin with. Anya finally tells her what she learned, that she killed her unrequited love and his girlfriend. Emily defends herself, saying that he had called her ugly and broke her heart, and that Anya of all people should understand that. Well, Anya happens to think that murder is not an appropriate response to disappointment. Emily says yeah, she made some mistakes, but she wants to make it right by giving her the life that she always wanted. Anya's not interested in the life that Emily wanted, or her taste in men. She demands that Emily give her the bone back, but she refuses, saying she'll not go back into the dark. She says that she'll give Anya more time to think it over and to realize that things are much better when she's on her side. Anya reminds herself that Emily can't go too far from the bone, so it must be somewhere in the house. After a while of searching, Anya goes downstairs and talks to her mother, who mentions that the school told her about Anya's big grade improvements, obviously a result of the cheating. As her mother cuts up some ingredients for dinner, Emily suddenly appears in the kitchen and cranks up the gas on the stove. Anya warns her mother, who's glad she noticed, saying she could have burned the whole house down. So now it seems Emily is straight up threatening to kill Anya's family. After this, Anya begins frantically searching for the bone around the kitchen. Dinner's almost ready, and Emily appears under the sink with her finger to her mouth. Anya then finds that a box of rat poison is laying empty. Realizing that Emily is attempting to poison her family, she rushes over and grabs the food, then pretends to slip and drop it all over the floor. That was the last of the meat, so Anya encourages her mother to order pizza instead. While she does, Emily appears again and points at her mother as if threatening to take her out first. Damn, this got really dark. Anya continues to search through the house, but still can't find the bone down to the last closet. She suddenly hears a loud crash and her mother cry out in pain. She runs out to find her mother had slipped on the stairs and has possibly broken her foot. Her little brother's marbles are all over the stairs. Anya quickly realizes this wasn't his doing, but Emily's. She offers to take her mom to the hospital, but remember, this is a tough lady from the old country. She says that she'll take a cab so Anya can stay here and watch her brother. It's nighttime at this point, and Anya is nervously smoking a cigarette, looking at a checklist of every possible room, and it looks like they've all been searched. She stops for a second and looks disgusted at the cigarette, putting it down. Maybe seeing Emily smoke made it a lot less cool. Just then she hears her brother cry out from his room, and Anya runs in to find Emily floating over his bed and whispering terrible things in his ear. The poor kid has tears streaming down his face, so who knows what she's telling him. Not that an evil ghost floating above your head isn't enough reason for a little kid to cry. Anya yells at Emily to get off him and she flies away. The poor kid's a mess, and Anya does her best to comfort him. While she does, she rants about how this is all her fault. She says she just needs to find that bone somewhere, and her little brother perks up, saying he actually found a bone in the hallway earlier, and he put it in his specimen box downstairs. They rush down to get it and find Emily trying her best to pick it up first. Anya just reaches through her hands and grabs it. She tells her brother to get back to his room and runs outside, going straight for the woods and the well. Emily chases behind her, saying she's going to kill her, but Anya stays a step ahead. As she approaches the tunnel by the woods, Emily rages out and increases her size until she's massive and her giant hands are inches from Anya. Finally, she finds the hole, and as she does, she turns on the spot and screams out at Emily, telling her to stop. She holds the bone in her hand right above the hole, threatening to drop it. Emily says she wasn't really going to kill her family, she just wanted Anya's attention. But Anya says she doesn't need Emily to make her life better, and in fact, she needs Anya. She wants her to dress up and chase boys because Emily never got to, but she refuses to live her life for her. At this point, Emily is a little less aggressive and even asks Anya to maybe give the bone to one of her friends like Shobin. Anya says she wouldn't give Emily to her worst enemies. Emily then accuses Anya of being selfish and says that if she really cared about Shobin, how come she hasn't talked to her in weeks? And if she loved her family so much, why does she lie about her last name? She even suggests that Anya is no different than her and would do the same things if she had the chance. This sets Anya off and she starts to move toward the hole again. Emily threatens her, saying she'll get another bone and make her way back up to Anya's house to get revenge. Anya doesn't buy it and says it doesn't matter because she's going to tell someone and get the well filled in. This enrages Emily again and she straight up charges at Anya, phasing through her stomach. It looks like an uncomfortable feeling, but it doesn't stop Anya and she drops the bone into the well. Emily screams out trying to fight it, but is ultimately dragged back into the well. There's a moment of quiet as Anya looks down into the dark well. She begins to walk away when something grabs her ankle. Looking down, she sees Emily has possessed her own skeleton and it's climbing out of the well. Anya kicks her foot loose and moves back, but Emily stands up looking pretty freaky as the bones glow. Anya starts to run away but stops. She confronts Emily, confessing that she may not be exactly like her, but she's enough like her to understand how she feels, envious of others and wondering how they have it so easy. But Emily needs to learn that you never really know what's going on in someone else's head. How does she know the girl she killed wasn't even more messed up than her, or the boy for that matter? No one has the right to decide who lives or dies. It's pretty clear that Emily can barely even stand in this form. It seems like Anya's words hit home and she looks up with tears in her eyes. Then she lets out a long sigh and falls backward, sending her skeleton into the well. We then get a time jump to the well being filled in by the school's public safety group. The guy in charge approaches Anya and has a hard time pronouncing her last name. This time she proudly says it and he thanks her for telling them about the hole. She says she didn't want anyone else to go through what she did, and the man likes her attitude, even suggesting to see her in the student election coming up. Afterwards, she has a seat on a log in the woods and Shobin finds her. Anya apologizes for not talking to her and she says it's no big deal. She offers Anya a smoke, but she refuses, saying she doesn't know if she ever really liked them and it doesn't look as cool as she thought it did. Shobin tells Anya that she may look normal on the outside, but she's not on the inside. Anya takes it as a compliment and we get a beautiful zoom out as the comic comes to an end. So there you have it, Anya's Ghost. There's a lot of interesting things you can take from this comic, but the thing that stood out to me the most is a lesson in judgment. You really don't know what's going on in someone else's life. Anya thought that Elizabeth was perfect and found out she was miserable and in a really jacked up relationship. On the other hand, Anya thought her life sucked and saw herself as horribly flawed, but from Dima's perspective, she was the cool one who had it easy. You just never know what's going on in someone's head. I highly recommend you all go buy a copy of Anya's Ghost at your local bookstore. One of the things that's completely lost in an overview video like this is the humor. This comic is genuinely funny, but what did you guys think? Let me know in the comments below, as well as anything else you'd like me to do a deep dive on. Shout out to Kill Me Katie as always for the intro and outro music, which is likely playing right now. And if you want to see your art at the end of my videos, email me a submission to the address below with a name or social media handle. But I appreciate you guys watching at all. This is Grease speaking. Goodbye, friends. Victor Frankenstein has just stepped into the territory of a god, stitching together human remains and giving them life, but he can't stand the sight of his own hideous creation. From here, Frankenstein's life unravels as the monster slowly takes everything he's ever loved away from him. Meanwhile, the monster himself questions his place in the world, an 8-foot-tall superhuman being who's ugly and scorned by humanity and his creator. This all culminates in a chilling tale that's disturbing and tragic. This is Mary Shelley's frightening story seen through the lens of one of the most iconic horror authors. This is Junji Ito's Frankenstein. Hello friends, this is Grief speaking, and today I'm covering Junji Ito's Frankenstein. I recently read the original 1818 novel by Mary Shelley and thought it would be fun to do a breakdown. Since Junji Ito's version is extremely faithful to the novel, other than a few changes, I thought it was the perfect way to cover Mary Shelley's original story, but still have some creepy visuals on screen at the same time. While we will be going through the manga, I'll be pointing out major differences and details in the hopes that this will not only provide good coverage of Junji Ito's version, but at the same time give you the basic idea of what happens in the novel as well. So I hope you enjoyed this telling of the story as much as I did. This is Junji Ito's Frankenstein Explained. Before we get into the manga, I'm excited to say that this video is sponsored by Raycon, and that's because I've actually used their earbuds for years now. I own multiple pairs for different situations, and honestly, I was probably wearing them while working on this video. The everyday earbuds have become essential for me. I hate having to constantly charge electronics, so I was shocked at how long these last. 8 hours of playtime and 32 total with the charging case. They're water resistant, have easy to use button controls, and can even pair with two devices at once, which is great for being connected to my computer and phone at the same time. I also do a lot of writing and research for these videos, and the active noise canceling feature helps me stay completely zoned in when I'm trying to focus. On the other hand, when I need to stay aware, the awareness mode is perfect, especially when I'm out walking or doing chores. The everyday buds come in some really cool colors like royal blue, rose gold, blush violet, and mint, but I had to stick with the carbon black to match the suit. You can also pick up one of their protective cases that come in a variety of patterns, like my favorite, Galaxy. Even with all of these features, Raycons are at half the price of other premium audio brands. Right now, to celebrate Raycon's 8th anniversary, you can get 20% off the Everyday Earbuds Classic. Just go to buyraycon.com/grief, that's buyraycon.com/grief to get 20% off your own pair. So once again, big thank you to Raycon for sponsoring this video. Now let's get into Junji Ito's Frankenstein. It's a cold, rainy night, and Victor Frankenstein is hard at work performing a miracle. At long last, he's unlocked the mysteries of life, and he loudly declares that tonight he has become a god. In front of him is a large bandaged figure. Its putrid, hazy eyes begin to open. What an eerie start. Next, we see a ship traveling north through icy waters. This expedition is led by a man named Walton. Apparently, he's prepared for this trip much of his young life, and finally had the ability to pursue his dreams of traveling to the North Pole. His first mate questions whether there really is something worth finding out there, but Walton assures him, saying many believe that if you travel far enough through the ice, you'll find a land of wonders. As they speak, the boat hits a large ice patch on the sea, and Walton looks discouraged, wondering how long they'll be stuck. Just then, one of the crew members spots something out on the ice, a series of shadows passing over the whiteness. On a closer look, it appears to be dozens of dogs pulling a sled. It's strange that someone would be traveling this far from civilization, and even stranger is that of the man's stature. He seems to be the size of a giant, nearly 8 foot tall. The man disappears into the snow, leaving Walton to wonder who this man was and what he was doing. Later, as he writes a letter in his cabin, the sound of ice breaking outside raises Walton's spirits. When he ventures out to see the progress, he finds the ship's crew gathered and looking over the side. Down below is a man on a drifting mass of ice with only one dog left on his sled. Everyone agrees, though, this is not the same person they saw the day before. Below, they see the serious face of a man peering up at them. He refuses to get on the ship or to be saved until he hears that they're traveling north. In that case, he agrees to board the ship. Inside, Walton has wrapped the man in blankets and laid him near the fire to recover. At this point, he's emaciated and lacks any strength. It looks like he's been through hell, and it's surprising that he's not dead. Walton asks him what it is he seeks to accomplish in this desolate place, and the ragged man says that he seeks the one who fled from him, the demon. Curious, Walton wonders if the man he seeks is of enormous stature, and says that they saw such a man on the ice the previous day. At this point, Walton asks for his name, and of course it's none other than Victor Frankenstein. After a few days on the ship, Victor has recovered quite a bit, and though he can barely walk, obsessively looks out with a telescope, hoping to spot the monster he chases. Him and Walton have gotten on quite well. Despite Frankenstein's outward appearance and seriousness, Walton sees in his eyes the remains of a good man. Inside, Walton discusses his plans to make discoveries at the North Pole and perhaps solve solve the mysteries of nature. This seems to trouble Frankenstein, who believes that Walton is on the same path he once was, seeking for knowledge and wisdom. But he warns Walton the results are that of the sick and troubled man that lay before him. This prompts Frankenstein to tell Walton his story and how he got to this point, hoping he may derive some moral from it. So he begins his tale of how great his ambition was and how he lost everything. Victor Frankenstein's childhood was a happy one. His family was wealthy and lived in the beautiful countryside of Geneva, Switzerland. At age 5, his family adopted a young girl named Elizabeth. She understood Victor well and they adored each other. Along with his best friend Henry, the three grew up together happily. At a young age, Victor developed a passion for natural philosophy after finding a book by Cornelius Agrippa. His father found the book outdated and called it sad trash, which kinda made me laugh. But this didn't stop Victor from obsessively reading more, dreaming one day of discovering the Philosopher's Stone and the Elixir of Life. While authors like Agrippa and Paracelsus were seen as out of touch with modern science, these authors and their otherworldly ambitions are a fundamental part of Frankenstein's eventual discovery. When he was 15, lightning struck the tree in the Frankenstein's garden. Their dinner guest, a natural philosopher, found it to be an exhilarating experience and went on to explain the recent scientific theory of Galvani called animal electricity. This, of course, was very real and controversial at the time, as Galvani showed that the muscles of a corpse could be reanimated using electrodes. The most famous example was that of frog legs moving around without a head. Anyway, this discussion leads Frankenstein to abandon these old ideas. As he looks at the scorched tree in the garden, he declares that he's wasted his time. Around the time Victor became an adult, his mother had gotten very ill and was tended to by the family maid Justine, who everyone adored. This is actually an important detail, as Justine has a big role to play later on. Soon, Victor's mother lay on her deathbed with her final wish being that Victor and Elizabeth be married, something she apparently planned from the beginning. After the passing of his mother, Victor decided to study at university and ventured off to Ingolstadt, Germany to commence his education. It's here that the true horror begins. This is where he met Professor Waldman, a man who, instead of disregarding the old philosophers like Agrippa, actually credited them with helping to develop the modern scientific theories. This merriment of the new and old scientists ignited a spark in Victor, who decided with an enthusiastic ambition that he too will do something great, going so far as to declare that he will be stepping into the territory of a god. After this, he began to feverishly dive into his study, and his talent was soon respected by even the masters. In his singular pursuit, the university had become no longer conducive to his studies. He needed further independent research and decided he would need a cemetery for his purposes. This eerie panel of Frankenstein looking out at the gravestones is really the start of his inevitable downfall. Frankenstein enters the cemetery and after this visits the tombs almost every night to investigate the process of physical decomposition. As he looks at the rotting corpses, we get some pretty detailed panels in that gritty Junji Ito style. It's disgusting. After days of this, Victor gazes upon another corpse and says that he finally understands it. He looks up at God and says that tonight he stands alongside him. He finally discovered the secret of life. By the way, same as the novel, we never learn exactly what the secret is. In the movies, it's often harnessing the power of lightning or something like that, but here something just clicks and Frankenstein knows how to form life. After this discovery, he rents out an apartment room at the very back of the top floor, trying his best to stay away from prying eyes. One night in the cemetery, the groundskeeper hears a strange noise coming from the morgue, believing it to be some kind of ghoul. He looks inside to see a figure coming up from the darkness. It's Frankenstein, covered in blood and carrying a sack. The man falls to the ground, believing that his fears are confirmed, that it's a vampire or monster of some sort. Frankenstein leaves in a dash, and the keeper calls the authorities. They investigate the tombs to find the bodies inside mutilated and missing limbs and organs, an act that baffles them. Later, we see Victor writing in his room while body parts are strewn about the floor. He says that he can make easier progress with the work if the body is larger and predicts it to be about 8 feet tall. He says that he can't use an expired brain and instead will have to create one from nothing, a feat that's now possible with his discoveries. He's still short on some organs and will have to use animal parts to make up for it. In a montage, we see him getting to work on his new project, sewing up limbs and attempting to construct a brain. At one point, he gets something wrong and in frustration smashes the brain with his fist. Gross. Finally, he begins to stitch up some of the parts, making a massive torso, and at the same time constructing a head around his brain. Finally, on a rainy night in November, the body is fully constructed, and it's quite a sight. It's huge and covered in bandages, except for some grotesque patches of sewn flesh that are still visible. It's a dark image, making great use of Ito's drawing style. Frankenstein deems it the ultimate creation. He then connects an instrument to the creature using a set of wires, and suddenly, its eyes open. The body begins to sit up, up, its flesh twisting as it does, and the wrappings fall from its face. Frankenstein looks at it with horror as it slowly turns around. Life is now behind the hideous eyes of this monster. The huge creature begins to move toward Victor, making disturbing guttural noises, and next thing we know, Victor wakes up in his bed. His friend Henry has been caring for him. Apparently, he came to study in Ingolstadt and sought out Victor. However, he found him lying face down in the street outside of the apartment building. So he carried him to his bed, and Victor slept for an entire day. It seems the shock of his creation, as well as the utter exhaustion from the process, finally took its toll. Victor shoots up from bed, terrified that the monster is still in the next room, or that Henry has seen the abomination he created. Henry had entered the room the monster was in, but saw nothing but broken equipment and blood. The memory of what happened rushes back into Victor's head, how he was unable to endure the disgusting nature of the monster he had created. He had run outside in terror and fainted on the street. Realizing now that the beast had left puts him at such ease that he lets out a laugh, but shortly after faints again. From here, Victor was ill and confined to bed for 6 months, haunted by the face of the monster and hoping to God he had died, unable to survive alone in the wild. Victor finally recovers with the help of his friend Henry, who looks after him, and he feels horribly guilty for consuming all of Henry's time since he's been in Germany. Henry only asks that he write back to his family, who have been worried about him, especially Elizabeth. After reading a kind letter from her, Victor's spirits are raised. Gradually, the horrible events of that night in his apartment faded, and he resolved to study a wholly different subject from natural philosophy. Back in Switzerland, we see Victor's father, along with Elizabeth and his kid brother William, having a picnic in the nearby woods. William asks Elizabeth about a locket she keeps around her neck, and Elizabeth reveals it to contain a portrait of William and Victor's late mother. William asks if he can hold it, and as soon as he gets it in his grasp, he shouts that it's his and runs off laughing. It's all in good fun, and this turns into a game of hide and seek as Elizabeth looks for him in the woods. While William hides behind a tree looking at the locket, a large figure approaches him. He looks up to see Frankenstein's monster shrouded in a cloak and standing as tall as a tree himself. It's an intimidating sight. Back in Germany, Victor gets a letter from his father and learns that his dear brother has been murdered. At this news, he feels he has no choice but to return home to comfort his family. While he travels back to Geneva, his father and Elizabeth are in shambles over the death of the boy. As they lament, the authorities arrive and declare they've found the culprit. Shockingly, they believe Justine, the family maid, to be the killer. Apparently, the locket that William held at the time of his death was found in Justine's pocket. This is pretty damning evidence, and despite Justine's pleas, she's taken to jail to await a trial. If she's found guilty, she'll be put to death. Meanwhile, Victor arrives in his homeland and travels past the very park which William was murdered in. He stops the carriage and walks into the dark woods, falling on his knees and mourning, wondering who killed his brother. Then from the nearby bushes, a figure emerges. It's the horrifying face of the demon, watching Victor with his glossy eyes before creeping away back into the woods. Victor chases the monster to a dead end at the side of a steep mountain, but the creature begins climbing it with superhuman speed and agility, disappearing over the top. Victor arrives at his family home, still shaken from what happened in the park. His father and Elizabeth are still upset about Justine, but have no choice given the evidence but believe her to be the killer. Victor tells them they're all mistaken. He knows the true killer. Still, he can't prove this, and if he did tell them who he thought it was, he would likely look like a madman. At the trial, Justine honestly defends herself, though she can't account for the locket that she possessed, and ultimately, she's found guilty for the crime and sentenced to death. Before her execution, Victor and Elizabeth visit her, and she's surprisingly at peace, saying at least she'll be with Victor's mother and William. The time comes, and Justine is walked to the guillotine to be beheaded. Victor can't help but feel responsible for her death, as well as William's, for it was his creation that did the deed. Overwhelmed with emotions, Victor begins to walk through the wild until he finds himself on a small mountaintop. As he stares over the cliff edge, he begins to hear deep and horrible laughter, turning around to see a massive hooded figure approach. The monster pulls off his hood to reveal his horrible disfigured face. At the sight of the demon, Victor picks up a rock intended as a weapon. Surprisingly, the monster begins to speak, asking Victor to hear his tale, and says that Frankenstein created him and therefore he has a responsibility as his maker to listen. Victor is still angry and replies that his only responsibility is to destroy his creation. He swings the rock at the monster, who easily evades him and grabs his arm, forcing him to drop it. As the monster does this, his cloak blows up, revealing his stitched up body underneath. He tells Frankenstein it's no use fighting and tells him to listen to him, and then, if he can or will, he can destroy the work of his own hands. With With not much choice, the monster leads Frankenstein to his dwelling, a lone shack in the mountains. Inside, the monster throws a bear's arm in front of Frankenstein for eating, I guess. It's one of the craziest and scariest images in this manga, as Victor looks over to see the huge creature chewing off the face of a brown bear in gory detail. He tells Victor that thanks to his powerful body, he can even kill a bear with his hands. But at the same time, his ugliness makes people fear and loathe him. From here, he begins his tale, starting at the night that he came into being. He had no understanding of anything really, other than it was cold. So he grabbed some of Victor's clothes and wandered outside. In the novel, he goes even further, explaining how utterly confusing it was, not being able to distinguish between his senses. This was the beginning of his agony. He eventually ventured through the woods, surviving on fruit and small animals. His first run-in with humans went as you might expect. The lumbering giant just walks into a cabin while a family is eating and scares the absolute shit out of him. They run away and he starts consuming their food, but before long they come back with a mob who starts attacking him. After a few similar encounters, the creature finally saw his face in the reflection of a pool and understood that he looked different from them, and his hideous nature is what scared them. Eventually, the monster found a place to hide in a shed attached to an isolated cabin. From inside, he began to spy on the family that dwelt there, an old blind man and 2 adult children who seemed to be on hard times. Since no one seemed to ever enter the shed, the creature stayed there for quite a while. As he listened to the family, he slowly learned about language and soon began to understand them. It was clear that they had suffered some misfortune, and the creature was filled with sorrow upon seeing their grief. At night, he would collect firewood for them, as well as clearing the path when it snowed. To the family, this seemed like something from folklore, and they believed it to be the work of fairies. One day, there was a big change when a woman arrived. Apparently, this was the son's lover, and they had been separated due to unfortunate circumstances. The woman was actually from another country, and every evening, the son would teach her his language and alphabet. So the creature also took these lessons through the wall, unbeknownst to them, and he actually learned the language faster than the woman even. At this point, the monster was hit upon by a sudden burning question. What exactly is he? He's unlike humans. If God made them, then who made him? Searching through the clothing he took from Frankenstein's apartment, the monster found a journal. Inside, he learned all about his creation and the name of his maker, Victor Frankenstein. The monster's existential crisis continues as he wonders why Frankenstein would make him so ugly and cursed to be alone. He wanted a family so bad, people to sympathize with him. So he hatched a plan. He would enter the family's home while the blind old man was alone, hoping that without seeing him, he would have a chance to make friends and explain his wretched appearance. You can really see how big the monster is as he kneels down in front of the little old man. The conversation seems to go well. The creature explains how he wants to visit a kind and loving family, but is afraid that they will not accept him for he's been persecuted by many. The old man sympathizes and says that he and his family have also seen misfortune, and encourages the creature to pursue this meeting, not knowing that it's his family that the creature's talking about. The monster's overjoyed at these words and grabs the old man, telling him it's his family that he wishes to befriend. However, just then, the others show up and see what looks like a hideous creature attacking their blind father. The son pulls the monster off and begins attacking him. Although the monster could easily tear this guy limb from limb, he runs away crying, his plan foiled, and the family he grew to love now hating him. Yeah, it's pretty heartbreaking, and this story does not let up. It's a tragedy through and through. After this incident, the monster declared that he would get revenge on humanity that had made him suffer so much, and his terrible creator. From the journal, the monster learned that Frankenstein was from Geneva, and so journeyed there with revenge in his heart. Finally, when he arrived, he came upon a family in the park. He waited until the little boy was alone, and then strangled him to death. Of course, this is William, and we can see his small body drop to the ground with a sickening thud. The monster finds the locket on the boy and grabs it. He then finds a young maid sleeping in a barn and slips the locket in her apron. This is how Justine ended up with it, and it was in fact the monster that killed William. While this was a rageful act, it actually was purely coincidental. The monster finishes his tale here and says that although humanity is now his enemy, his creator alone can save him. He then puts forth a request to Frankenstein, that he make another creature in the likeness of him, but a woman. That's right, baby, the bride of Frankenstein. Victor's in shock at this and can't believe what he's hearing. The creature says again that he wants a woman, someone to ease his loneliness. Just as God made Adam and Eve, he believes Frankenstein has a duty to make another. Victor refuses and says that no form of torture would get him to consent to this, and that all he produced was an ugly lump of flesh. The monster replies that he may be a lump of flesh, but he's also intelligent. He tells Victor that if he refuses, refuses, he will work at his destruction and desolate his heart until he curses the day he was born. On the other hand, if he obliges this request, he will take his bride to the wilds of South Africa, where they will be isolated from humanity, never harming another soul again. Victor is still uneasy and not sure if he can take the creature at his word. After all, what if he were to make another being like this and the two of them work together to undo humanity, or worse, begin to breed and take over the earth? The creature says that with the love of a companion, hatred will be snuffed out of his heart, and he pleads with Victor, saying he needs to be saved and he's the only one who can do it. Sympathizing with the creature and not really seeing a better option, Victor finally consents to the monster's demand. The demon is overjoyed and tells Frankenstein that he will watch from afar and arrive when the woman is ready. Returning home, Victor starts to go over the logistics of his new project. Surely he couldn't do it here and would need a place far from others, a laboratory where he could start his work. The next issue is gathering materials. In Germany, he was so caught up in his ambition that he hardly was affected by the grave robbing, but now he wonders if he has the stomach for such a terrible act. While he thinks all of this over, his father approaches him with an important topic. He reminds Victor of what his mother wished for on her deathbed, and asks Victor to be honest, does he truly have feelings for Elizabeth? Victor truthfully tells his father that he is absolutely in love with Elizabeth, and she's the only woman he could ever marry. With this, his father suggests that they get married immediately then. Victor agrees, but first must complete his project, so he asks his father if it's okay that he travels to England and will marry Elizabeth when he returns. The day comes where Victor is about to depart when his friend Henry shows up to surprise him. He plans on coming along. This would be wonderful news, but instead it's a bit of a roadblock as Victor has to find a reason to get away from him to start on the bride. After they arrive in England, Victor just tells Henry he needs time alone, maybe a month or so, and that they'll meet up again afterwards. Henry is suspicious but agrees, and so Frankenstein heads out to find a laboratory. He happens upon an old and abandoned building next to a cemetery out in the country and decides it would be a perfect place. In another stroke of luck, as he arrives, he sees a funeral in session of 4 young women who were killed in a landslide. Fresh female corpses ripe for the picking to create the monster's bride. Victor digs up the graves and collects the bodies to bring them to his lab, constantly apologizing to the dead for doing so. While the bodies will work well for taking limbs and organs, the heads of the women have been crushed in the accident. It's pretty disturbing even with the bandages covering them. Even so, he begins stitching together the bride's body and once again profusely apologizing to these poor sacrifices. Soon the massive female body is almost complete and he gives it enormous breasts for some reason. I guess he's trying to throw the monster a bone or something. It's almost comical. Anyway, after working non-stop, Frankenstein is overcome with exhaustion and falls asleep where he dreams about Justine's death, and here we actually see her head get sliced off. When he wakes up, he starts trying to finish the body by putting the last arm on when Henry shows up unexpectedly and sees everything. Victor has no choice but to explain the whole story to Henry, and the dude is surprisingly chill about the whole thing. He even says he'll help Victor finish the bride, seeing that as the best possible option. Talk about a good friend. So the two continue grave robbing at night in search of a usable head for the creature. Unfortunately, they can't find any candidates. Just as they start to give up hope, the monster shows up out of the blue. The daunting figure crouches inside the lab and holds up a severed head. Apparently, he'd been watching their progress and saw that they lacked materials. So he plops down the woman's head, which he says he found in a Swiss cemetery, and he leaves. The men walk over to take a look at it and are shocked to find that it's Justine's. This enrages Victor, who accuses the monster of picking her head intentionally to torment him. It's unclear whether this is actually the case or it's just a coincidence. Henry surprisingly convinces Frankenstein that this is a good thing and could give Justine another shot at life since she was taken unjustly. Victor decides to go along with this, but like the other creature, he still must make a new brain and is worried that this monster will also become violent. Either way, they've got nothing to lose and resolve to make the bride with Justine's head and to raise her up pure and sweet. After the body is complete, they connect several instruments to it, and soon her eyes open. Immediately, Victor tells her her name is Justine and tells her that she is kind and gentle. At the same time, the monster peers in through the door with a terrifying grin. Victor helps the gigantic woman up, but as he does, she grabs some nearby scissors and stabs Victor in the arm with them. She stands up and removes the bandages from her head, revealing wild hair and stitches all around. She then lets out a blood-curdling moan, and the original monster moves in on her with a creepy smile. However, when the bride sees his face, She's horrified. Even his bride, made in the same likeness, finds him hideous. The bride then uses the scissors to slash at the monster and bares her teeth in a devilish display. The monster angrily grabs her and strangles her until the stitches all come undone and her body crumbles into a pile of parts on the floor. He turns to Victor in anger and accuses him of making the bride just to try to destroy him instead of being his companion. He declares that it is now his turn for revenge and says that Victor will lose everything he loves. He leaves and Victor realizes what this means, that the monster intends to kill his father and Elizabeth. Victor can barely move due to his wound, but Henry takes the carriage after the creature to try and stop him. Victor struggles his way down the road until he comes upon the carriage, which is now smashed, and Henry laying dead. Victor returned home after this to, sure enough, find his father and Elizabeth slain as well. Elizabeth's death is particularly tragic as she was wearing her bridal gown in anticipation for Victor's return. As he discovers her body, he hears ominous laughter and sees the monster peering through the window with a smile, pointing at Victor's dead bride and laughing. It then takes us out of the story and back on Walton's ship, where Victor concludes his story by saying that he vowed to follow the creature to kill it or be killed by it, and that the monster intentionally has been running to the cold north in order to torture Victor. After telling this story, Victor doesn't look too hot and collapses in exhaustion. Walton heads up top and is surrounded by the men who demand that he turn the ship around. The ice is only getting worse and some men have already died due to the cold. So Walton has no choice but to turn around lest he be responsible for more deaths. In the cabin, Walton pleads with Frankenstein to quit his revenge mission and return home with him where they can face defeat together as friends. But Victor says that the only path left for him is to destroy the monster he created. He then lets out a long sigh and goes silent. Back up top, Bosun asks Walton what will happen to Frankenstein. Will he continue alone in pursuit of the monster? Walton then informs him that Frankenstein just died a few moments ago. Just then, a loud wailing rings out from the ice. The men look over the ship to see the monster standing in the snow, crying his eyes out and screaming in despair. He somehow sensed the passing of his maker and yells out that there is no one now. He is completely alone. But soon, this suffering too shall end. Walton says that the figure slowly faded as their ship sailed away, and that is the end of Junji Ito's Frankenstein. As I said, it is an utter tragedy through and through. One of the things you may notice here is how totally different this story is from the film adaptations that brought the monster into pop culture, especially the 1931 film starring Boris Karloff as the monster. This is easily the most iconic version of Frankenstein, and I was shocked reading the book and subsequently Ito's adaptation at how different that movie is from its source material. While it shares some key moments and themes, it's almost a different story. I could do a whole video talking about the differences there, but since we're talking Junji Ito's manga version, let's focus on differences between the manga and the book. As I mentioned before, it may be the best adaptation of the story in another medium. It pretty much goes through the book beat for beat and doesn't even try to incorporate some of the later Frankenstein imagery like the crazy mad scientist lab or lightning bringing the creature to life. That being said, there are some differences from the original 1818 novel that are worth noting. Some of these I alluded to while going through the manga, but let's just run down the list. Most of the differences are actually in what was and wasn't included. The novel takes on average around 5 to 6 hours to read, and the manga takes about an hour or less. So obviously you can't squeeze every detail in. I mean, for God's sake, the book has 4 chapters just dedicated to the monster spying on the family in the cottage. For the most part, what's left out doesn't affect the story at all. A lot of it is poetic and philosophical monologues that Victor and the monster go on, which are very fascinating, but don't translate well to the comic format, which is mostly visual storytelling. One important moment that's missing from the manga, however, is the drowning girl. Funny enough, this is actually in the 1931 film. When the monster leaves the family after being attacked by the sun, he later comes upon a girl drowning in a lake and saves her. Instead of getting thanks from her father, the man straight up pulls out a gun and shoots him. After this, the monster finds William and strangles him, although in the book this act is more heavily provoked. He actually tries to befriend William, but the boy won't stop insulting him, calling him a disgusting ogre. Unlike the manga, he also mentions that his father's name is Mr. Frankenstein, and upon hearing the name of his creator, who he's seeking revenge on, he chokes the kid out. Another big change that's maybe the biggest difference in this version is that in the novel, Henry Henry never helps Frankenstein. Other than Walton, no one ever finds out what Frankenstein has done. While Henry does accompany him to England, he never checks up on Frankenstein and therefore never offers to help make the bride. The other major change has to do with the bride herself. In the novel, Frankenstein does build the body of the bride, but she doesn't have Justine's head. And more importantly, before Frankenstein even gives her life, he's overwhelmed with guilt and horror, and so he smashes the corpse to pieces himself. Of course, the monster witnesses this, and it sends him on his revenge mission to kill Victor's family. So the events shake out the same way, but the whole thing with Justine's head on the bride, that's all Junji Ito. And honestly, I kind of like it. There's some more minor differences, but they're mostly just ways of condensing the story. Like how after the events of Justine's death, the Frankenstein family take a vacation to France to try and raise their spirits, and this is where he encounters the monster on the mountaintop who had followed him there, as opposed to the manga where he simply wanders onto a mountain in Switzerland and finds the creature there. Now, we've talked about the things that were missing from the adaptation, but what about the things that were added? I already mentioned Henry and the bride, but the major addition here that feels more in line with some of the movies and also fleshes out the story in a good way is Frankenstein's grave robbing. The book surprisingly skims over him collecting the body parts, maybe because it was too shocking in the 1800s to add gory details or something, but it was cool to see Junji Ito fill in the blanks and really display the depravity of the act here in the manga. I also love the gravekeeper thinking that Frankenstein is a monster when he exits the tombs covered in blood. It plays into the classic question of who the real monster is in this story. So there you have it, folks. After watching this, you should more or less have a fairly comprehensive understanding of the original Frankenstein story, one that I think more people should definitely take the time to check out. You can buy Junji Ito's Frankenstein collection, which actually includes some bonus stories that are great, but also do yourself a favor and read Mary Shelley's original story. You can find it for free online pretty easily since it's in the public domain, and there are also a lot of really cool physical versions as well. Shout out to Kill Me Katie as always for the intro and outro music, which is likely playing right now. And if you want to see your art at the end of my videos, email me a submission to the address below with a name or social media handle. But I appreciate you guys watching at all. This is Grief speaking. Goodbye, friends. Welcome to Grimmeryland, a new theme park full of fun thrills and amazing attractions. 6 high school friends reunite as they're invited to be the premier guests. Things quickly go off the deep end, however, when they find that the attractions are horrifying and seemingly deadly. They have no choice but to enter the different areas of the park or be chased around by murderous mascots. As they make their way through the unsettling attractions, they start to find clues on how to escape, and they're all tied to the friends' twisted pasts. Is this just an elaborate prank with cutting-edge effects and over-the-top scares, or is something sinister going on behind the scenes? Either way, it's a frightening journey with some truly disturbing moments and shocking twists. Grab yourself a ticket. Welcome to Grimmeryland. Hello friends, this is Grief speaking. I asked you again what comics you wanted me to cover on the channel, and I got a few people asking me to please cover more webcomics because they don't really get the in-depth coverage that I typically give on my channel. So today we're looking at another webtoon comic called Grimmeryland. I've really enjoyed reading this one. It's got some of the conspiracy elements of Everything is Fine and the YA drama of Stagtown, but it also feels completely different than the other webcomics I've covered. Of course, it's chock full of horror as well. Grimmeryland does a particularly good job of setting up disturbing scenarios. It's not a massive series, but it's still big enough that I've decided to divvy it up into 2 videos. So this week we'll cover the first half of the series, and next week we'll wrap it up with the series finale. But let's not waste any more time and get into it. This is Grimmeryland Explained. The story kicks off with a creepy-ass character named Grimmery welcoming 6 friends to a new theme park, the aptly named Grimmeryland. He says that their worst nightmares are born in this place, and it's too late to back out now. This message is shown to the friends in the back of a limo as they head to Grimmeryland. So let's do a quick roll call here. We've got Bruno, Margot, Zoe, Raimi, Jax, and Becca. We jump ahead and learn that the gang has been waiting inside the limo without moving for a half an hour, and there's no signal. 6 Sick of waiting for someone to formally let them out, Margot just opens the door, and they find themselves outside of the freaky entrance. Becca takes a picture but is a little confused. The only reason they are here in the first place is because she's an influencer, but without any signal, how's she supposed to promote it live? As they enter the park, they're greeted with a creepy Grimmery fountain, and they decide to try the first attraction they see, which is labeled Happy Family. They enter to find a bizarre setup for a ride. An animatronic husband, wife, and son are standing in what looks like a living room, and a narration plays introducing them to the Thompsons, the happiest family in America. There's several oversized baby carriages on a track used as carts for the ride, so the crew climb in to a cart and roll into the next room. We learn more about this idyllic family. The father, James, worked at a prestigious company, and his beautiful wife dedicated her heart and soul to the family's well-being. Zoe takes issue with the fact that the husband gets a name and a job, and she's just the wife, only valued for her beauty and servitude. Jax immediately rolls his eyes and tells her to shut up about it. In the next room, we see that the wife is pregnant, and the family's excited as they anticipate the arrival of a beautiful baby girl. At this point, everyone's wondering if this is even supposed to be scary, but up ahead, the track splits, and the three carts separate into different rooms. Jax and Becca roll into a bit of a darker turn for the Thompsons. Apparently, James lost his job, which has led him to heavy drinking. We then cut to Rami and Zoe. In their room, they see something even worse. James eventually began taking out his problems on his wife and would brutally beat her. Yep, things have drastically escalated, and we can see the bruised cheek of the wife as James hits her with a belt. Zoe's disturbed by the sight of it, and it seems to relate closely to her own past. The narration continues, and we learn that during one of the beatings, the wife lost her baby. And there's a pretty disturbing panel showing the bottom of the puppet's dress covered in blood. My god. Bruno and Margot then see the next scenario. The little boy had been very excited for the baby, and after it died, he began to take care of a doll as if it were his sister. Pretty sad and creepy. One day, the family heard cries of a baby coming from behind the walls of the house. The boy believed that by playing with the doll so much, he had somehow managed to contact his dead sister. He tells this to everyone, including his friend Margot. The fact that the character in the story has the same name freaks Margot out, and she demands they leave the ride. She struggles to undo the lap bar. We see Jax and Becca approach the next scenario. We learn that the cries did not appear because of the boy. It was actually the mother, and we see a pretty messed up scene of the mother standing over a bloody broken doll in some kind of ritual. It seems like she started sacrificing other infants in an attempt to bring hers back. Finally, Margot manages to get the bar up and jumps out of the carriage. They walk down the track a bit until they find an exit door. However, when they enter, they seem to be back in the living room, and the others all show up to the same place. The entrance is now boarded up, and they begin to hear singing coming from upstairs. A song with some unsettling lyrics ring out. "My dear sweet girl, I felt you growing inside of me. I lost you and I thought I was going crazy." The gang then makes their way upstairs and follow the song to a room. Inside, Mrs. Thompson is standing over the bed and continues the song. "But thanks to love, I've been able to bring you back." The gang approaches the bed, and this is a really messed up scene. The father, James, is laying on the bed with his stomach swelled up like a pregnant woman. There's some weird details here that imply this is not a puppet, but real human flesh. Either that or Grimmery really went all out with the effects. The wife then finishes up the song. "Through your executor, you will be reborn." She pulls up a knife and then slashes into James' belly, tearing it open and shooting blood out onto Becca's face. The wife turns to look at her and says, "And you will become my baby's food." She pulls up the knife and runs at them, screaming, "Feed my baby." I don't know what I was expecting from this comic, but it wasn't this shit. I mean, what the hell? The friends all run back downstairs and find all the doors are locked except one, which leads to the basement. Downstairs, they find the weird symbols used in the mother's bizarre ritual. Suddenly, the walls burst into flames and everyone freaks out when they see the most terrifying thing so far. A giant cursed baby chained to the ceiling, and its umbilical cord like a snake with sharp teeth. It is a really creepy sight that I won't be forgetting anytime soon. They manage to dodge the umbilical cord and climb out of a nearby window to safety. For a moment, they all just stand there outside of the house, wondering what the hell just happened. Margot calls out Becca for dragging them here to this twisted park, but Jax defends her, saying, "Come on, it was fun." Zoe points out the fact that Becca has actual blood on her face, and they almost burned alive down there. Margot declares she's leaving, and Jax tries to convince her to turn back, saying it was just dolls and some really good effects. They make it back to the entrance and find the limo is gone. But Margot doesn't let this deter her, and she starts walking into the dead of night. The thing is, eventually she hits a thick wall of concrete. They realize they're not outside at all, and never were. Suddenly, Gregory's disembodied voice speaks to them, telling them that there is only one exit out of the park, and the only way to access it is to locate the different clues scattered around the attractions. He ends this with an ominous "Welcome to Grimmery Land." Everyone is a little freaked out, but Becca is still holding on hope that this is all part of the experience. Margot points out the burn on her shirt and thinks Becca is not taking this seriously. But either way, they're stuck in here and need to continue through the park. Back inside, they look for a staff member to let them out, but it's pretty much a ghost town. Finally, they see a gift shop and figure there should be some employees inside. As you might expect, the place is deserted, and Margot once again starts berating Becca for getting them into this mess. As they argue, Raimi wanders off toward the back of the store. He's a little freaked out when he sees a shelf of Grimmery dolls and a weird panda head sitting on top. It seems to have blood speckled on its cheeks, and he moves in for a closer look when suddenly it opens its mouth in a big smile. This jump scares Raimi and he falls to the floor yelling. What he was actually seeing was someone in a panda suit standing outside the window behind the shelf. They all hurry outside to figure out what's going on and are confronted with three mascots: a bunny, a goat, and of course the panda. They're just standing there staring. It's pretty creepy. Jax demands they tell him how to get out of the park, but the figures stay silent. On a close look, we can see they're all splattered with blood. Then they all pull weapons out from behind their backs. The bunny has a spiked bat, the panda has a chainsaw, and the goat has two sets of huge bloody shears. They start chasing the friends, who run in a panic into a nearby building, slamming the door behind them. They pause for a moment, wondering if this is still part of the entertainment or if the mascots would have actually hurt them. Bruno managed to grab a section of a map from the gift shop, and they figured they must have entered what's labeled the Museum of the Sleepers, whatever that means. In the next room, they see an older gentleman watching static on a TV and a sign that says "Silence, please." When they enter, they discover the man is simply another doll, although he's very realistic. As they admire him, Grimmery suddenly pops onto the TV. He introduces them to the Museum of the Sleepers and tells them this is a place of contemplation, so it's very important not to disturb their sleep. He says the doll's name is Jeff. Jeff ensures that the rules are met and thus maintains absolute silence during their tour. Grimmery leaves the screen while telling them to enjoy their visits, and then the words 16 sleepers flashes on the screen. Well, they don't have much choice, so the crew looks ahead to an eerily dark hallway. On the floor, we can see a rail, presumably for Jeff to travel along if needed. They hear Jax call out from behind, telling them to check out Jeff's new look. This doofus swapped hats with the doll as a goof, and the rest of them just tell him to knock it off. There's always one guy like this in every horror movie. In the middle of the hallway, they pass by a strange exhibit of a colorfully dressed woman with her eyes closed holding a book. The art here is really creepy. It's hard to explain. It both looks like a comic drawing and also kind of like a photo at the same time. Anyway, that a-hole Jax decides to yell at the woman to wake up, and as soon as he does, her eyes spring open. Becca asks Jax what the hell he's doing, and he justifies it by pointing out how happy the woman looks. At the same time, however, wheels can be heard moving in on them fast, and we see Jeff rushing toward them on the rail. He slams into Jax, knocking him to the ground. The doll then raises a finger to his lips and shushes him. Okay, that's pretty creepy, and I'm less and less sure that Jeff is actually a puppet. Anyway, Jax acts like he could have kicked Jeff's ass if he wanted to, and they move along to the next exhibit. Now the hallway is filled with several vases atop a series of pedestals. This forces them to carefully squeeze past to get through. In the wall is another doll surrounded by rose bushes and holding a violin. They're successful for the most part, getting to the other side without bumping the vases, until Bruno's chain wallet snags on one of the pedestals, pulling it over and breaking the vase. God damn it, a chain wallet, really? Anyway, as soon as it shatters, the puppet's eyes pop open and they begin to play the violin. In a terrifying flash, Jeff wheels toward them, this time with a nightstick, and takes a swing at Margot. Jax has had enough and squares up on Jeff, ready to fight back, but Jeff don't play that shit, and he smacks Jax across the jaw before once again shushing him. After this, they decide it's best to just keep moving. They come upon a sign that says Old Milltown, and they walk out into a much more open area that resembles a creepy old town, like something from A Nightmare Before Christmas. They're all really on guard now, trying to keep quiet in case Jeff comes to kick their ass again. However, right in front of Margot, a giant spider drops down by its web. She can't help but let out a terrified scream. One of the old mill houses lights up, a crow caws, and wheels can be heard rapidly approaching on the track. Jeff comes barreling at them, this time holding a freaking taser. Luckily, they all jump out of the way, and Jeff just shushes them once again. As he wheels away, Jax is sick of it and runs up, kicking Jeff in the back. Immediately, the taser swaps out of his hand for a gun. He turns around with glowing red eyes and points the gun at Jax. Man, who would have thought the scariest thing in this comic so far would be an old dude named Jeff. Don't fuck with Jeff, that's all I gotta say. He fires a gun which whizzes right by Jax and Becca and blows a hole in one of the houses. They look at the puppet in terror as he once again shushes them. They continue on to the next area. It's another hallway, but this one is extremely long and narrow, so if Jeff attacks again, there's no chance of getting out of the way. They finally reach the end and find it blocked by an iron gate. On the other side is a series of mannequins dancing, and one is holding the key to the gate. On the floor below the mannequin, it's clear that there is a rail path leading to the gate, meaning that if they woke up the mannequins, it would likely unlock the gate, but doing so is also going to alert Jeff. It's their only chance, so on 3, Zoe screams at the mannequin to wake up. Its eyes open and it slowly moves towards the door while the other figures dance around the room. At the same time, Jeff comes wheeling toward them faster than ever, his eyes glowing red again. It's honestly a horrifying image. The key turns, the gate opens, and everyone bolts to the other side of the room where the exit door is, dodging the dancing mannequins along the way. Becca is furthest behind and gets slammed by one of the dancers, knocking her glasses to the ground. She picks them up and comes running, but this slows her down significantly. Just as she reaches the others, a gunshot sounds and a bullet tears right through Becca's skull. Zoe has no choice but to shut the exit door, and as Becca's body collapses, we can see Jeff one last time with his smoking pistol and glowing red eyes. It then cuts to the TV from the start of the attraction, and we see the number increase from 16 sleepers to 17. That's a pretty eerie way to end this section. Outside, the gang of friends break down crying over what happened, other than Jax of course, because he's so tough, you know. Raimi walks up to Zoe, who's got her head in her arms, and this triggers a flashback to a similar situation back in high school, where Zoe sat at the same position but for a completely different reason. There's some quick flashing images suggesting that Zoe had suffered physical abuse from her father. Raimi tries to comfort her and she smacks his hand away, saying not to touch her, and how all men believe they have the right to do whatever they want with women. She takes it further by accusing them of all being violent by nature and then runs away. The next day, when class ends, Raimi offers to walk home with Zoe, but she ignores him and asks Becca to walk home instead. Later, while Becca and Zoe are walking, they encounter Raimi being bullied by some classmates. Zoe immediately interferes and chews them out for picking on him. We learn the reason they're bullying him is because he's gay, and they accuse him of checking them out in class. Along with the two bullies is Jax. He's not engaging in it himself, but is still complacent as his friends harass Raimi. Later, Zoe apologizes for giving Raimi the cold shoulder. Things are bad at home and she just took it out on him. Back in the present, while his friends cry, Jax says it's not their fault and they just need to move on or they'll never escape. Zoe snaps at him, telling him to let them have a minute for God's sake. She questions why Jax doesn't seem to care at all about what happened to Becca, and he coldly accuses her of leaving Becca behind. This turns into a heated back and forth where they basically accuse each other of getting their friend killed. Meanwhile, Raimi seems to be stressing out. He finally snaps at Jax, telling him to shut up and calling him an insensitive asshole, saying that he should be dead instead of Becca. Pretty harsh, though it turns out that this was just a fantasy in Raimi's head. In reality, he calms himself down. He does so by imagining he's talking to an angel who guides him and keeps him rational. He does put a stop to the argument, but in a much more diplomatic way, and so the crew moves along. Next, they encounter an old cinema. In place of a ticket booth is a strange series of symbols and the instructions to choose a seat. Weird. There's a vending machine nearby, and Bruno grabs himself a drink. As he takes a swig, he sees something out of the corner of his eye. The killer mascots making their way toward them. With no way into the cinema, they bolt for the next attraction, a small church surrounded by a cemetery. They run inside and the iron gates lock behind them. First, they try to get into the church, but it's locked, and as they make their way around, they find themselves in a massive maze. After a seemingly endless series of turns, it's clear that they're lost and might not ever find a way out. Bruno hears a strange noise and turns to see the silhouette of a little girl. He seems to recognize her, addressing the figure as Mia, and takes off after the shadow. Then we get a little bit of Bruno's backstory. In the past, we see a photo of Bruno and his little sister Mia, clearly a happy pair of siblings. Bruno sits lazily on his bed texting Margot, who says that she's going to be in the library all day studying. Bruno's mother comes in and asks if he's spoken to his sister since her piano lessons finished up hours ago and she's not answering her phone. The ever-annoyed teenager, Bruno says he doesn't know and that she's probably fine. In reality, she's far from fine. In fact, she's dead and her corpse is laying alone on a dirt trail. Back in the present, Bruno continues to chase after Mia's silhouette until he finds a mausoleum. with his own name on it. It's about this time when the others realize that Bruno is missing. They search for him and end up finding the mausoleum, along with others that have their names on them. Zoe enters hers looking for any clues when the floor drops out from under her and she falls into the darkness below. In what appears to be another flashback, Bruno plays hide and seek with Mia in a field. However, he actually finds her body contorted on the ground, and her lungs are completely outside of her body, protruding from her mouth. It's bizarre and terrifying. There's a flash of an inhaler spraying into thin air and Mia choking. Then Bruno wakes up. This was nothing but a nightmare. Apparently, Bruno fell through the floor as well and was knocked out from the fall. He finds himself in a sort of dungeon and can hear Mia calling to him from the darkness up ahead. She says that she's been waiting for him and now they can be together forever. He turns a corner and sees something absolutely frightening. A creature comes running out from the dark, and it's nightmare fuel to say the least. It looks like a set of human lungs on a metallic skeleton missing its arms, and it has knives for legs. The creepiest part, however, is its face. Remember in the museum how I said that the art looked almost like a real photo mixed with a drawing? Well, this is a much more disturbing version of that. Bruno runs like hell until he hits a dead end back where he started. He finds a different path until he ends up in a chamber with multiple entryways. Out of one of the doors, two more of the creatures appear and run at him. Back up top, the other three try and figure out what happened to Zoe, and when Raimi enters her mausoleum, nothing happens. He realizes that maybe they need to enter their own, and sure enough, when he walks inside of the one with his name, he falls through the floor, spraining his ankle in the process. He limps along through the dark corridor and sees skulls on the walls as he passes. Up ahead, he sees a shadow, but instead of one of the creatures, it turns out to be Jax. In some ways, that might be worse. They scare the hell out of each other and then continue onward. The only path forward, however, seems to have corpses lining the walls. Raimi's too scared to go through, and Jax bullies him, calling him a little girl. He eventually softens though and takes Raimi's hand, leading him through. As they emerge on the other side, they hear Bruno shout and run up ahead to see what happened. They enter the chamber Bruno is standing in, and it shifts to Bruno's perspective. He sees Jax and Raimi as the two creatures rushing toward him. He screams at them not to come near, and I get why. These things are freaky as hell from his point of view. It then cuts to another flashback. We learn that Margot and Bruno were really close before his sister passed away, and she was almost like part of the family. After Mia's death, Bruno became fairly closed off and had a hard time moving on. She even finds him trying to contact Mia with a Ouija board. Pretty sad. In the present, Bruno comes back to his senses, and the gang thinks that there must have been something in the drink he got from the vending machine which caused him to hallucinate. Either way, he says that there's something really wrong with this park. It's like the attractions are related to them somehow. Not to mention their names engraved in the mausoleums. Nearby in the chamber, Zoe finds a red journal. Inside, the author mentions painting arrows to find their way back out, but warns of a monster hidden beneath the church. Every night at midnight, the priest claims to hear strange noises under the floor. Just then, the church bell rings, striking midnight. Everyone's eyes widen, and nearby they hear a sound coming from one of the entryways, which is laced with human skulls. Zoe looks in and sees a bloody trail, and then from the end of the tunnel emerges a massive worm-like creature with sharp teeth wriggling toward them. They run in the opposite direction and spot one of the red arrows. According to the journal, this will lead to the exit. Unfortunately, Raimi's ankle is messed up and he's moving slow, but Jax helps him walk and they finally make it to the way out. Only problem is, it's blocked by rubble. In the distance, they can hear the giant worm still chasing them. There's actually kind of an interesting shot here where we can see that it has wheels on the bottom, just like Jeff. Okay, so I guess Grimoire is really good at making cool ass effects. They all work together to start clearing the rubble and make it out before it gets to them. They spot the nearest street lamp and make it back to one of the park's paths. Oddly enough, it starts raining, which means they're still outside despite the large walls closing them in. The good news is, once it's dawn, they'll be able to see much easier and get the hell out of here. Up ahead, they see a burger restaurant. Everyone heads inside and Jax takes Raimi into the outside bathroom to help him with his ankle. He looks for a first aid kit and Raimi tells him he's thankful for the help and that things seem better between them. Jax starts to wrap Raimi's ankle and we get another backstory segment. Turns out that Jax and Raimi were really good friends when they were younger. Although after an encounter where Jax kisses him on the cheek, Jax's father tells him not to do that. It's not normal. Later, we see the two boys playing with dolls at the park when some other boys show up and call them homos and say they're acting like girls or they'd come play football with them. Jax gets defensive and ditches Raimi to go play ball. We then get a montage of Jax aging up while quotes from his homophobic father litter the panels. It's all pretty stereotypical stuff like how men have to act tough. There's a weird line where he says a real man has a big, but it cuts off before we see the obvious ending. It then cuts to Jax as an adult about to get it on with a girl, but when she grabs the crotch of his pants, he gets hesitant about the whole thing. The girl is pretty annoyed with the tease and suggests that maybe he has a pretty small one. In a comically shocking moment, his crotch gets its own speech bubble saying, "Don't let a girl talk to you like that, Jax. She's just a He then chokes the girl, calling her a bitch. Wow, just in case Jax wasn't already your most hated character. It then cuts back to the present where Jax and Raimi are kissing. So I guess that's why the guy acts so macho. He's overcompensating in a couple of different ways. But seriously, what was with his crotch talking to him? That was a little goofy for an otherwise serious comic. Inside the burger joint, the others try and come up with a plan. Margot thinks they should tour the entire park and try to find another exit, but the others believe they ultimately are gonna have to visit each attraction before Grimmery will let them leave. Plus, those mascots are still out there and wandering the streets isn't the best idea. Bruno flips through the journal they found and in one of the pages discovers a symbol that he swears he saw on the cinema ticket machine. Thinking back on it, there was one symbol with a fetus, which may be related to the first attraction, and Margot noticed at the museum that Jeff had a badge with a moon symbol. Maybe they could try selecting these symbols and finally find an exit. It's worth a shot and they head back to the cinema. Sure enough, they select the symbols and the doors swing open. Everyone heads in but Margot, who refuses to enter, saying they'll end up dead if they keep going on like this. Bruno asks her to please come with them and she follows along. They enter one of the theaters and suddenly the projector starts up, playing a video of Grimmery welcoming them and introducing a horror film starring our dear friends. Suddenly a title card pops up on the screen that says 3 mascots from hell and shows the creepy eyes of the killer mascots. Zoe investigates the screen and finds that there's some space behind it. She thinks that they'll have to enter the movie, so to speak. Margot freaks out again and tries to leave but finds the doors are locked. Zoe and the others try to tell her there's no other choice, they just have to move forward, and Margot just sits down in one of the seats, telling them to just go by themselves. If they do find a clue, then they can come back and get her. What a brat. Bruno says they can't force her and offers to stay with her so she's not left alone. Zoe warns them not to split the party, but Margot insists, and so Bruno and her stay behind while Zoe, Jax, and Raimi climb behind the screen. They move through some curtains to find a forest basked in a red glow. Raimi tries to talk to Jax about what happened, but he just says it was a mistake and calls it disgusting. Obviously, Raimi's pretty upset, but once again he gets guidance from his imaginary angel who reminds him not to take it personally. It's not his fault that Jax is living in denial. They eventually come upon an old barn, but it's locked, so they enter a nearby country house to look for a key. As they creep through the doorway, they look over and see the goat mascot sitting in an armchair and watching Static on a TV. Back in the cinema, Margot and Bruno have a moment to talk. Margot comments about how different everyone is from when they were in high school, especially Zoe, who now she can't even stand. She says that her and Bruno have always had a special bond though, right? He just says, yeah, you've always been a good family friend, obviously not getting the hint, and you can see her smile fade. Once the others spot the mascot, they try and stay quiet and sneak into the other section of the house. They make it to the kitchen, which has blood smeared across almost every surface and a pot full of what looks like entrails. Jax checks one of the cupboards and a plate falls out, shattering on the ground. In the next room, we can see the goat stand up holding the large shears, and he knows they're here. They split up to different hiding spots. Zoe hides in the pantry where she finds the barn key, and as the goat enters the kitchen, Jax and Raimi sneak around the counters and into the other room. Unfortunately, the goat moves right toward the pantry and stops in front of it. But before he does anything to Zoe, Jax shouts at the mascot to distract him, and the chase is on as the goat follows them through the house. When they get back to the front door, they find, as usual, that it's now locked. Raimi narrowly avoids getting stabbed by the shears, and they head up the stairs instead. The goat is right behind him though, and once again slashes at him with the large shears. Before they make contact, Zoe jumps on the mascot's back and tries to choke him. She tells Raimi to run. The goat knocks her off down the stairs and continues his pursuit of the guys. There's only one door upstairs and it's barred by a 2x4. They pull it off and look inside to see something pretty messed up. 2 bodies are hanging from the ceiling with their skin flayed off. The mascot bursts in behind them and pins Jax to a table in the room. As he struggles to fight the killer off, Raimi just stands there shaking in fear without helping. In a tense struggle, Jax sees a crowbar on the table but can't quite reach it. He's almost done for when he spots the goat's other pair of shears in its pocket. He slides them out and stabs the goat in the neck, killing him. Out of curiosity, Jax pulls off its mask to reveal a pretty disturbed looking bald man underneath, now with a massive hole in his neck of course. He looks malnourished and part of his ear is missing. I wonder who this guy was and how he ended up working for Grimory. Jax turns to Raimi and lays into him for not helping, calling him a sissy. Raimi tries to stay calm and looks towards the angel, talking him down, but Jax's words obscure her and he calls Raimi a dwarf. Raimi then sharply replies that unlike Jax, he's not ashamed of his size. This of course leaves Jax silent for a moment. Then his crotch talks to him again, saying not to let Raimi talk to him like this and to show him who the real man is here. Jax goes into a full rage and starts choking Raimi, telling him again that he disgusts him. In another flashback, this time in middle school, we see where Raimi first developed the idea of the angel based on a children's show that he liked. In class, we see some kids bully him and call him a girl. These are clearly Jax's friends and he just stands there letting them do it. Finally, Raimi can't take it anymore and snaps, stabbing one of the bullies in the hand with his pen. Man, Raimi really has some suppressed rage built up in him, huh? After this incident, Raimi's parents put him in therapy, and as an exercise, he starts writing stories as a way of venting his anger. He even wins an award for one. In the present, Jax stops choking him and suddenly he's hit with years of pent-up frustration from the abuse he's suffered. He picks up the crowbar and bashes Jax in the head with it, leaving a bloody gash. Jax calls him a coward, saying he doesn't have the guts to fight like a man. Raimi looks at him with wide eyes and says, "This is not cowardly, this is evolution." He raises the crowbar and then proceeds to smash the living hell out of Jax. Blood sprays and we get a glimpse of Jax and Raimi as children, with blood splattering onto the memories. As he delivers the final devastating blow, we can see the angel that guides him burning up in flames. Zoe catches up to the room to see the gruesome sight, the dead mascot and Jax murdered by Raimi. He looks up at Zoe and she's shocked, saying, "What have you done?" He starts to defend himself, saying he was tired of it, the insults, the abuse, and being despised by society. Zoe of all people should understand the pain that these kind of people cause. They're an obstruction to the improvement of the world. Zoe looks over at Jax's bloody head and says that Raimi's lost his mind, and that at the end of the day, he's worse than the very people he's talking about. She slams the door shut and bars it again, locking Raimi inside with the three corpses. Back at the cinema, Zoe stands outside the curtains in the woods, reflecting on what she just witnessed. She finds Margot and Bruno still sitting inside, and not knowing how to explain the truth, she lies, saying that Jax and Raimi fell into an underground corridor like in the cemetery, and it closed before she could save them. Zoe says they'll probably catch up with them later and leads them to the barn, which she uses the key to open. They walk into a drastically different setting. It feels like a fun house with bright neon colors on every surface. The floor is one big black and purple spiral. Makes me dizzy just looking at it. They cross the room toward the exit door, but of course it won't open. Hanging at the center of the room is another key, but before they can jump and grab it, the bunny mascot appears on a tricycle hanging from the ceiling. He says, "Let's go for a spin," and shifts a lever, causing the room to spin. They struggle to stand, and Zoe goes to grab the key when the bunny shifts the lever in the opposite direction, causing the spin to reverse and speed up. It gets so intense that they can't even move. Bruno gets really close to grabbing the key, but before he can, he pukes everywhere and passes out. Margot thinks fast and pulls a picture frame from the wall. She throws it at the key, knocking it to the ground by Zoe. Zoe grabs it and slowly crawls to the door. The intensity here is crazy as she painstakingly gets the door open and the room stops spinning. It's one of those moments where I physically felt relieved that the scenario was over. They enter the next room and the door locks behind them. It seems they're in a sort of cage with three huge buttons on the ground, and on the other side of the bars is the panda mascot along with a big screen. He says it's time to test their friendship with the truth game. They must answer a series of questions by stepping on the number button corresponding with the right answer. The longer they take to answer the question, the faster the ceiling will drop on them. Bruno looks up and sees massive spikes above them, and if they get an answer wrong, the ceiling will drop significantly. The panda wastes no time before jumping into the first question: who is the youngest in the group? On the screen, we see three options: Raimi, Jax, and Becca. The ceiling starts lowering and the three quickly try and remember everyone's birthdays, and after doing the math, they finally decide Becca's the youngest and hit the third button. This is correct and the spike ceiling stops. The next question is, what is Margot's favorite color? That's an easy one, she immediately steps on pink. Next, the panda asks, what is Chandler's job? They're all pretty confused. Who the hell's Chandler? Well, if you're a Friends fan, you know this is a reference to Chandler Bing and the show's ongoing joke of no one knowing what his actual job is. Well, I guess these three never watched the show and picked the wrong answer by randomly guessing. So the ceiling drops quite a bit, now hovering just over their heads. By the way, the correct answer was data analyst. Anyway, the next question is who locked their best friend in a farmhouse room? Of course, every answer is the same: Zoe. She stomps on one of the buttons and tells them she'll explain later. Margot isn't having it and confronts her, realizing Zoe lied to them, and asks what really happened. The panda then asks the final question: where were you not on March 27th, 2010 at 5:30 p.m.? Bruno instantly recognizes the date as the day his sister died. The three options are in the library, at home, and with Mia. It's kind of a messed up question, but obviously none of them were with Mia when she died. Bruno feels a ton of guilt all of a sudden though, wishing he had been there to pick her up from her piano lessons. Zoe steps on the third option, but the screen says this was incorrect. The ceiling then drops so low they're forced to practically lay down to avoid being stabbed. The panda says since this was the last question, he'll give them one more chance. They can't figure out why this would be incorrect, thinking maybe it's a trick question or something. They panic as the spikes get inches from their faces. Then Margot suddenly presses one of the buttons. She picked the option labeled with Mia, and that answer is correct. So the spikes retreat to the ceiling. Bruno comes to the realization that Margot must have been with Mia when she died. She admits that she wasn't at the library and was in fact with Mia. She explains what happened, and we see this in the form of a flashback. Margot decided to pick up Mia from her piano lesson so they could talk about an issue between them. They went for a walk on the mountain trail by Mia's academy. Margot felt like Mia had distanced herself from her and notes that she was barely speaking to her. She says that Mia then told her how she couldn't stand her and she was tired of seeing her at their house constantly. Mainly, Mia hated how she was hogging Bruno, and she calls Margot a parasite on the family. Margot ran away, and the next day she heard the news that Mia's body was found. She felt so guilty that she just couldn't bring herself to tell Bruno. In the present, the panda gives them a reward for winning the truth game. The final clue is displayed on the screen in the form of an arrow pointing to an area on the map. The door opens up, and as they exit into the rain, a dramatic dialogue ensues between Bruno and Margot. Obviously, Bruno feels betrayed and says he can't even look at Margot anymore. They move on in silence to the next clue and find the entrance to a roller coaster. They figure they'll have to ride it, and they get into the carts, the front of which is splattered with blood. Zoe is really nervous about this, saying she has a fear of heights. Once they're locked in, Gremory appears on the screen. He congratulates them on making it this far and says that the coaster will lead them to the park exit. The coaster suddenly launches forward and the ride begins. They go up to a steep slope at the top of the tracks, and as they near the top, they can see a ceiling. Yeah, so it's not just walls closing them in, the whole park is completely sealed up top to bottom, and there's hundreds of sprinklers on the ceiling, which are what's causing the rain. They go up over the top, and right before the gravity sinks in, the chest bars on the carts unlatch. Man, that is a frightening thought. Well, fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, the cart locks up, leaving them stuck at the top of the tracks. Zoe is freaking the hell out, and I don't blame her. Bruno tries to calm her down and spots what looks like a set of stairs at the bottom of the tracks, a possible exit. Out of options once again, they're forced to start climbing downward. Bruno and Margot make it down to the flat part of the track quickly, but Zoe, afraid of heights, is taking her time. Taking advantage of the moment alone, Margot tries again to apologize to Bruno for not telling him about what happened with her and Mia. He just tells her to leave him alone again, and she asks why he's doing this to her. It's not her fault Mia had that asthma attack, and it's not her fault the inhaler was empty. Bruno glances back at her and asks, "How did you know the inhaler was empty?" It jumps to another flashback. Margot talks about how she became infatuated with Bruno from the moment she met him and wanted to be a part of his life. She loved his family too and quickly became like another daughter to them. The only problem was his little sister Mia. Bruno and Mia were close, and Margot saw her as an obstacle. We see Margot pick up Mia from her piano lessons, but this time we see the truth. Margot is the one who has an issue and tells Mia she's been preventing her from spending more time with Bruno. Mia explains that she's not trying to push Margot away, she just wants to spend time with her brother as well. But Margot goes all psycho, telling the girl not to play dumb. Clearly this is a concerted effort against her. Mia does admit that sometimes she wants to spend time with her family, and just her family, without Margot being involved. She didn't say anything because she didn't want to hurt Margot's feelings. The argument gets heated, and eventually Mia does call her a parasite on the family, but now these words seem way more justified considering Margot's crazy behavior, especially since Mia is obviously way younger. In the middle of the conversation, Mia begins violently coughing and needs her inhaler. Margot pulls it out for her but hesitates. Mia falls to her knees in a fit and begs Margot for it, but in a seriously shocking moment, Margot intentionally wastes the inhaler, spraying it into the air. Mia collapses to the ground, her bloodshot eyes wide in fear, and she finally dies. Wow, so it was so much worse than we thought. Margot runs away and starts texting Bruno, giving him the made-up library alibi. Back in the present, Bruno pieces together what happened. If Margot knew about the inhaler, she must have been the one to empty it. He believes the reason Margot wanted to try and leave the park so early on was because she was afraid Gremory would reveal the truth. Margot runs up and hugs Bruno, pathetically begging for his love and forgiveness. Bruno tries his best to push her away from him. She says that if he forgives her, she'll tell him who's behind all of this. She thinks she knows who Gremory is. Zoe finally makes it down and sees there's a struggle up ahead. Margot's gone full psycho, and it's pretty dangerous. A wrong move here could send them both falling off the tracks. Zoe catches up to them and pulls Margot off, asking her what her problem is. She just tells Zoe to watch her foot or she could fall. This forces Zoe to look down, which triggers her acrophobia. Margot takes the opportunity to verbally attack Zoe for always thinking she's so perfect and preaching to everyone. She says that Zoe isn't better than her and never will be. She then raises a foot, ready to kick Zoe off the tracks, but at the last second, Bruno moves in and pushes Margot off, who goes falling to her death below. It then cuts to another flashback. It seems to be a graduation party as the 6 friends sit around having a drink and celebrating never having to go back to high school. Becca tells Zoe she better keep in touch, and we get a quick flash of her in the museum with a bullet through her head. We see Jax and Raimi smiling at each other, and then quick glimpses of Raimi killing Jax in a bloody mess. Margot says that Bruno probably won't come after the death of his sister, and we get another flash of her falling to her death. So wait, if Bruno's not here, then who's the 6th friend? It's a girl named Eva, who I guess they're all very close to. Her name and face is familiar, as she's already been mentioned in passing a couple times, and we can even see her talking to Raimi in one of the flashbacks. They all toast each other, and it finally cuts back to the present. Zoe's trying to comfort Bruno, saying that he had to do what he did to save her life. They stand up and start to move when suddenly the coaster springs to life behind them and starts heading their way fast. Bruno grabs Zoe's hand and they run as fast as they can towards the stairs, barely making it and avoiding the carts. In a moment of relief, they hold each other and share a glance. Make of that what you will. They make their way down the stairs and into a wooded area. Here they find a lit path and begin to follow it. They see a red X marked on one of the trees, and up ahead, finally, an exit to the park. But someone steps onto the path in front of them. The panda mascot appears, sporting his signature chainsaw. He dashes at them, swinging it, and they run in opposite directions. Zoe thinks she got away, but from nearby, a hand reaches out and grabs her, though we don't know whose. Bruno, on the other hand, is out of the frying pan and into the fire as he runs straight into the bunny mascot, who starts swinging at him with its spiked bat. He ends up back on the lighted path and sees the exit again. With both mascots now hot on his tail, he runs into the glowing park exit, though his face shows pure shock at what he sees on the other side. We don't get to see what it is, and instead it cuts to a totally different area and character. An older woman is standing at the edge of some woods in the middle of the wilderness. She speaks to someone on the phone, saying she'll handle this case. The person on the other line implies that she's only doing this for her daughter, and she says she'll do it for her sake. A group of friends doesn't just vanish without a trace like this. She hangs up, and we get an inner monologue where we find out that this is Eva's mother, and she wants to know who Gremory is and who killed her daughter. This immediately opens the door to a lot of questions, but this is the season 1 finale, and where I'm gonna end the video for now. What do you guys think is going on here? What did Bruno find behind that exit? Who grabbed Zoe in the woods? What happened to Eva? And for God's sakes, who is Gremory? Don't worry, next week I'll be covering seasons 2 and 3 and wrapping up the whole series, so we'll finally get some answers. Shout out to Kill Me Katie, as always, for the intro and outro music, which is likely playing right now. And if you want to see your art at the end of my videos, email me a submission to the address below with a name or social media handle. But I appreciate you guys watching at all. This is Grief speaking. Goodbye, friends. A young girl named Alice wakes up in a white room with a number tattooed on her hand. She's guest 431 of the Manor. Here you can have anything you want, as a talking serpent will grant your every wish. However, Alice is interested in getting back outside to the real world. The problem is, the only way out is to pass through all 431 rooms, and the further Alice gets from her own room, the more her body will rot. Bibliomania follows Alice as she makes her way through the manor, encountering the guests and their wishes. Some are funny, some are sad, and some are very disturbing. All the while, Alice's body begins to break down from the rot. Can she make it to room 0 before her body crumbles? Or worse, will she become a victim to one of the disturbed guests and their twisted fantasies? Find out as we do a deep dive into Bibliomania. Hello friends, this is Grief speaking, and I'm excited for today's video because we're going to cover my favorite obscure manga, Bibliomania. I originally found this one on the Disturbing Manga Iceberg, and it was easily one of the standouts on that whole chart. Don't worry, it's not as up as Child of God, but it does have its share of unsettling moments, mostly in the body horror department. The only thing I don't like about Bibliomania is the fact that it's not officially published in English. Yeah, the copy I have is actually in Spanish. Well, maybe if it gets a little more attention, we'll get the English version eventually. Anyway, get ready for one hell of an adventure with some shocking twists and stellar artwork. This is Bibliomania Explained. Chapter 1: Alice in Phantasmagoria. In a dense city, an explosion lights up the sky. We then see some narration that reads, "I heard a loud sound. I opened my eyes. It would seem the sturdy coffin that sealed me has been broken. I'll leave this coffin and fill my body for the first time in a while." In the center of the city is a massive sphere, and it seems this is the source of the explosion. There's now a massive hole in its side that's smoking. From inside, a giant creature starts to emerge, and the people on the street are running for their lives as the voice continues saying, "I'll eat without thinking of anything. I'll eat and eat and eat." We can see a few men who've taken refuge in a building, only for huge, sinister eyes to look into the window at them. It's an eerie image, especially with the narration ending with the words, "This is my only happiness." This is followed by a beautiful title page showing ships broken to pieces in the nearby ocean and Bibliomania at the top. The letters made up of small characters that would easily fit on a deck of playing cards. These characters are actually seen later in the story, so this page is fun to go back to after you finish. After that ominous opening, it moves into the real story. A bell rings out and a voice declares that a new guest has arrived. On the floor of a completely white room sits up a girl named Alice. She looks up to see only one object in the room, a large door. She looks at her hand and sees the number 431. On the door is the number 430. The door also has a beautiful design covered in an artistic filigree. It's actually a large part of this comic style. You'll notice that some of the buildings and ships earlier had similar patterns on them. With a bemused grin on her face, Alice approaches the door. She reaches for the handle, which has the symbol of a snake on it, when suddenly a disturbing face appears behind her. He welcomes her to his manor and introduces himself as the Serpent, a fitting title as he looks like a large snake with arms and wears a suit. He says it's been a while since he's had a guest and seems delighted at Alice's arrival. He snaps his fingers and summons an armchair out of thin air for Alice to sit in. Then he tells her to wait in this room until the party begins. He says there's going to be a wondrous banquet, but it'll take a little time to prepare. As he speaks, strange symbols can be seen forming behind his teeth, and he tells Alice that as long as she's in this room, she can have anything she desires. Alice's belly rumbles, and to demonstrate what he means, the Serpent snaps his fingers and giant strawberries begin raining from the sky. At the same time, massive cakes grow out of the ground like a dessert paradise. The Serpent tells her not to leave the room and disappears. It then cuts back to the destroyed city, and we see the words "Alice, 5 days until entry" at the top. We can see Alice unfazed walking through the empty streets until she comes upon a small doll. She picks it up and its arm falls off. Suddenly she catches a familiar smell in the air and begins following her nose. Behind her, the doll lay on the street with a butterfly resting on it. Okay, so maybe this is before Alice entered the Serpent's manor. Back in room 431, Alice has had her fill of desserts. In fact, the giant plates are basically empty, so she really went to town, I guess. Well, out of boredom, I guess, she once again approaches the door to room 431. She opens it up and begins to walk through when she feels a sharp pain on her hand. Her skin looks like it's rotting or something, and as she investigates, the serpent appears screaming at her and pulls her back into her own room. He tells her that if she leaves, her body will begin to rot, and the further she gets, the worse the effects are. He goes on to explain more about the manor, how there are 431 guests and 431 rooms. For every new occupant, a new room is added, and that's how it's always been since the beginning, a long time ago. He says that one day when room 666 is added, the manor will be complete, and they can all celebrate with a big party. He adds that any guest attending the party will not be able to leave the manor for all of eternity. He considers this a good thing since here you can have literally anything you can imagine. It's so much better than the outside world, which is full of suffering and conflict. Alice furrows her brow and says there are good things out there too, you know. She then throws a quick tantrum saying she doesn't want to go to the party, she wants to go home. It almost seems like the serpent looks right at us and calls her a silly girl. He informs her that there is one way to leave. If you wish to return to the outside world, you'll have to get to the very first room to be made in the manor, room 000. Alice immediately jumps towards the door before the serpent can finish. He grabs her by the collar and continues, saying that in order to get there, she would have to make her way through all 430 rooms, which is a problem because, as he mentioned, the further she gets from her room, the more her body will rot. But here, she'll be just fine, and as proof, Alice looks at her hand to find that it's healed back to normal. By the time she would make it to the exit, however, the rot would consume her entire body and she would die. As the serpent continues his warnings, Alice slowly sneaks off toward the door once again and simply says, "I guess that means I gotta hurry." She opens the door and the serpent tells her point blank that she'll regret this. It then cuts back to the broken city once again, this time saying 4 days until entry. Alice casually walks through the wreckage with a smile, sniffing the air to find the source of the smell. Eventually, she stands on a massive gun near the beach and declares that she's found what the smell is. The gun here is really interesting and suggests that this is either a futuristic or alternate world because of the difference in technology. There's something about the design that kind of reminds me of Fullmetal Alchemist. But let's move into Chapter 2, The Trials of Room 430. Back in the manor, Alice steps into room 430. Her hand immediately begins rotting, but she pays it no mind and actually sings a cheery nursery rhyme as she walks. She finds herself in the middle of a town in feudal Japan, and a voice rings out saying that the court is now in session. A giant mechanical samurai comes out and sits at the top of some steps, asking for the sinner to come forth. Luckily, he's not referring to Alice, but an unfortunate teen in a school uniform whose head is covered by a large block. Two mechanical men bring him before the giant and tell him to confess his sins. The blockhead admits that he bullied a classmate and drove him to suicide. Whoa. Well, the samurai judge follows up by asking, "Why did you abuse him?" Surprisingly, the teen on trial admits that he did it because it was fun, even saying that his victim was a pussy bitch. We get a glimpse of the bullying, although in this flashback, the student still has the block on his head. He's forced his classmate to strip to his underwear, and this sicko sits on him like a human chair. It's actually worse than that. He puts a bottle under the kid's forehead for support, which must hurt like hell. Eventually, his victim can't support his head any longer, and the weight breaks the bottle, making them both topple over. The bully is pissed and says that he had no right to stop being a chair. After some physical abuse, the bully pulls his phone out to get a photo of his victim, laughing the whole time. Damn, this got really dark. The judge asks if it was really that fun, and before the guy can answer, the mechanical men cut off his head. This happens so quickly it actually surprised me. Alice, as usual, is unfazed, just watching this unfold with curiosity. The serpent shows up and says that this is no place for children and yanks her up with his coiled tail. The judge then has the next sinner come to trial, and it seems like it's the same guy. The serpent tells Alice that ever since this guest came to the manor, he's been killing the same person over and over again. Just then, the block-headed bully is beheaded once more. It's become clear now that the samurai is the bullied student, and he rages out, screaming that he's not a chair while beheading his tormentor over and over again. Apparently, he's done this for years, and we can see him raging out at the bully, saying, "How about you be my chair, asshole?" From further away, we can now see that the thousands of heads he's chopped off have formed a sort of chair under him. It's a great revenge tale, except for the fact that it sounds like a miserable existence living in bitterness for all of eternity like this. The mechanical swordsmen around are laughing maniacally and look pretty disturbing. The samurai not only judges his bully, but everyone else who sat there and watched doing nothing. In the end, he wants to kill everyone, making this area a lot less safe for Alice. Just as the mechanical men slash at Alice with their swords, the serpent grabs her again, yanking her to safety. Behind them, there's a pretty wild panel of the samurai slashing up hundreds of victims and crying out that it'll never be enough for his chair. At this point, it's clear that Alice needs to leave, so she presses on to the next room. Chapter 3: The Bird of 413 and the Hero of 385. In the past, Alice, now 3 days from entry, jumps from the massive gun and to the rocky beach below without taking any fall damage. She continues sniffing and says it's close. Alice walks through another door and finds herself falling upward into the sky, eventually landing on something soft above. The serpent appears and tells her that the occupant of this room wished to become a bird, and we can see that Alice landed on the bird's back. It's huge and has a human face, which is kind of creepy, but beautiful at the same time. This guest wanted to be free from the meaningless borders drawn across the ground and to be free of the conflicts of man. So she became a bird, soaring through the sky and forgetting she was ever human. The serpent asks Alice if she truly wishes to return to the outside world, and she answers with a smile, "You bet." At this point, her arm is pretty unsightly, rotted into a twisted, mutated mess. As the bird continues flying through the heavens, the serpent reveals that he himself has never seen reality. The system forbids him from leaving the manor, but listening to his guests has made him think. For a human to leave this place is to let go of great happiness. Alice says that that may be true, but she doesn't want a world built on her own lies. Instead, she'd rather experience the itty-bitty happiness of the real world. The great bird flies past a moon, atop of which sits the next door. Alice jumps off towards it, declaring that she hates lies. She waves goodbye to the bird and the serpent and enters the next room. Alice, 2 days until entry, walks along the beach. In the water are many more large guns, some twisted and broken. She continues searching among the wreckage along the coast for whatever it is she wants, and it cuts back to the manor. It's clear that we aren't going to see every room of the manor, as Alice is now at room 385. It makes sense though, this would be the longest manga ever if that were the case. As she enters, we get another glimpse of her rotted arm, and it now has bits of feathers sticking out of it. It's almost like it's been taking on some of the other guests' characteristics. It's also now up to her shoulder. Alice takes 2 steps into the room when a huge alien monster lands right next to her. She just grins at it, not concerned at all, and it goes in for the kill. Just before it smashes her face in, a person moves in with amazing speed to save her. He is a superhero with a metallic exosuit. Kinda looks like Ida from My Hero Academia. He talks all dramatic, calling the alien an evildoer, then introduces himself as Space Mobile Suit Prince Ericrom. After this theatrical moment, he looks over at Alice, who clearly doesn't know who he is. The alien leaps at him, but Ericrom pauses it like a video game and turns back to Alice, still shocked that she hasn't heard of him. He explains that he's from a best-selling comic book. He unpauses the creature and turns around to slash it in half with his energy sword. Nearby, a giant slug creature opens up its sides to reveal more aliens, and it launches them out like pods. It's actually some cool creature design here, a mashup of biology and technology. Anyway, the aliens surround Alice and the hero, and strangely enough, they're yelling things at him like work and get married. Ericrom does a super move, rapidly slashing around and exterminating them in a flash. As soon as he does, a bunch of hot bikini babes come running out to surround him. Alice is just casually watching this whole thing and calls it cliche. Suddenly, a massive alien creature shows up like a boss fight, saying he's going to reduce the galaxy to dust. Ericrom decides to take on such a foe, he'll need to do a suit swap, and for a brief moment, we see who he really is, a severely overweight balding man in his underwear. This is the guest of 385, and it's obvious what his wish is. He changes into a suit with a blaster cannon, looking cool as ever, when Alice says, "You're not exactly young, are you?" Her speech bubble strikes him through the chest and hits him for 999 damage. Okay, now that's funny. The giant alien mocks him, saying he can't even handle the words of a little girl, and then calls the hero his pathetic son, saying, "Leave your room, do some work, get married." And we can see a glimpse of what the guest's life was like in the real world, him sitting in front of a computer monitor surrounded by Aerocrom figures and posters. He yells out at the alien, a representation of his father, demanding that he respect him. They battle it out, and Aerocrom deals the final blow, destroying the beast. In the rubble, Alice spots the door to the next room. A ton of bikini babes come running out to surround the hero and kiss him, and Alice gives him an uneasy look before leaving. I love this chapter because of how it slips into being a comedy for a few minutes, even though ultimately the guest backstory is still pretty sad. Chapter 4, The Dining Table of Room 285. We cut back to Alice one day until entry, and she's still searching the beach. She looks into a huge destroyed tank and seems to find something. It looks like a book that's been chained shut. She sniffs it and says it smells like her little brother. Then walking back toward the destroyed city, she says, "Let's go home." In the manor, we get a montage of various rooms as Alice makes her way through. Room 366 has a guest smoking multiple cigars at once with smoke coming out of his eyes. 359 is full of instruments and music, and in 339 the guest has made himself a tree and become one with nature. As she continues to travel, we can see the rot growing across Alice's body, now reaching the back of her head. Room 330 seems to be a massive orgy. In 324 the guest is traveling the universe as a spaceman. In room 298 the guest has made himself a huge baby playing with toys, and the guest of 306 has made himself immensely rich. Alice enters room 285 and mentions that her body is heavy as lead on account of the rot spreading so badly. It's actually one of the most disturbing moments so far. The rot on the back of her head produces the full snout of a dog. It pokes out from her hair and breathes heavily. It's really off-putting. This room is the most normal that she's entered. It appears to be just a house. Eventually she comes upon the dining room where she sees a family eating dinner. A husband, his wife, and their son. They question who Alice is, and she tells them she's heading for the outside world. She asks if they'd like to come with her, and the father is immediately enraged. He yells at her for barging into his house and calls her a brat. The serpent appears and points out how bad the rot has taken over her body, calling it desire poison. He also says that this guest would never accept her offer to leave. In the real world, he was a teacher, teaching logic and ethics to children. Ironically, his family was far from the ideal that he taught. His wife was distant and his child was a total brat. This contradiction between his doctrine and reality crushed him. We can see a creepy image of his students pointing at him and questioning his own ethics. This drove the man to drinking, and he fell victim to the curse of time. In a sort of symbolic retaliation, the man picks up a clock and throws it into an hourglass, shattering it and sending gears, bolts, and sand onto the floor. In room 285, the man now serves up plates of the sand and clock parts to his family for dinner. It's really bizarre and quite unsettling, but in this place without time, he'll never grow old, his family will never leave him, and they are perfect in every way, in line with his own brand of ethics. Here, he can have a perfect life. Even so, the man chews on the clock pieces, making horrible noises, and Alice questions if this can really be called life. Even more disturbing, some of the metal pieces pierce through the father's cheeks and blood runs down his face. Alice moves on through the next door. Chapter 5, The Bog of 276. In another flashback, Alice, now 10 seconds before entry, sits on her bed and breaks open the locks around the book. Its covers bear resemblance to the doors in the manor, and she begins to open it. When she does, it floats into the air and all the pages flutter. The seconds count down, and before you know it, Alice is sucked into the book. This seems to confirm that the manor is actually this book, and these flashbacks were leading up to Alice appearing in room 431. Inside, she's not looking too hot. The rot is now moving onto her face, and she's walking slowly through room 276, which is covered in thorny roses. The occupant of this room is a beautiful woman who continually stares at herself in the mirror. She asks Alice why she insists on returning to the real world when there is nothing there but pain. Alice tries to argue with her, but the woman cuts her off and asks her if she knows what it's like to fear death every night. She compares it to drowning in a bog. Here, she can remain beautiful forever. Alice asks her if she had a family. Was no one there for her? This really sets the woman off, and she yells at Alice to quit her nonsense. Her face has rapidly changed to that of a decrepit old woman, and thorns grow out of her face. In reality, this woman feared death, and aging horribly, was kept in a hospital waiting to die. Her family disdained her for having to foot the medical bills. She eventually escaped the hospital and wandered into the woods, planning to hang herself. However, as she puts the rope around her neck, she looks over and sees the book. As she explains this to Alice, the thorns on the roses begin to cut her, water and fill the room with blood to the point that it's waist deep. The woman says in this room she can live forever and reveals her face to be nothing but a skull now. Alice is silent and turns towards the door, wading through the blood. The skull-faced woman laughs ominously as Alice exits to the next room. Outside, we can see the book sitting on Alice's bed, and up above, a hole in the ceiling that looks exactly like the one made in the giant sphere from the beginning of the comic. In a slow zoom out, it's revealed that the bed rests on top of thousands of objects and artifacts from all across history, like a bizarre collection of everything that's ever existed. At the bottom, dozens of people are tied up and blindfolded, screaming for help. What the hell is happening here? Chapter 6, The Tombstone of 268 and the Researcher of 255. Breathing heavily, Alice makes her way through the manor. At this point, almost her entire body is rotting and transformed as she steps into room 268. It consists of hundreds of paper strips with symbols on them, like ribbons of information. The serpent stands inside as if waiting for her. He tells her that this room's occupant was like her and sought to reach room 0, or more accurately, page 0. He reaches out his arms and says that this is all that remains of him, waves of information in a sea of data. His soul became words after his body crumbled, and now they reside here. There's a beautifully disturbing image of Alice, half of her face now rotted with tentacles growing out of it. It's a really gorgeous panel. The serpent once again warns her that if she proceeds, she'll end up like this. However, Alice says nothing and continues to the next door. The serpent ponders what drives her. What is it that she wants in the outside world? She leaves and he calls her foolish, saying that she has no idea that room 0 was never made to be reachable. He gets pissed off, impatiently waiting for the book to reach page 666 and having to fulfill these ridiculous wishes for humans. He ends by saying something kind of ominous. I must bring them also. They will listen to my voice. It cuts back to the people who are tied up outside and they start screaming that it's coming back. The beast has come. Alice wakes up in room 255 and curiously, she's completely back to normal without any rot. She finds herself in a large glass chamber like a test tube. Soon, a creepy-ass scientist peers in at her and presses a button which sends her through a long series of tubes before spitting her out. The scientist tells Alice that thanks to her, he's got some great data now. Several more similar-looking scientists surround her and he says that he cloned himself in order to analyze the book from every possible angle. So I guess these aren't other scientists, but rather odd-shaped clones. We get a zoom out of the lab which is massive and complicated, but there's a lot of data to process after all. The scientists say they found her at the entrance collapsed and ready to die, but he injected her with a drug that he developed that suppresses the rot, although it only works once. They all laugh creepily while staring at her, and then the scientist says he'll explain the secret of the book that they're all in. Weirdly enough, the top of one of the clone's heads pops off and his brain jumps out with arms and legs, and it runs around like a dog playing with Alice. Weird, but cute. It rests on Alice's head and its eyes project a screen on the wall. The scientist uses this like a PowerPoint presentation and says that once the manor or book reaches 666 people, it will bind all of their flesh and souls together, merging into a being of great power. This is the party the serpent speaks of. For every wish that's granted, the occupants become more insane and they grow further away from their neighbors and the outside world. It makes them stay in their rooms and rots away their desire to escape. The scientist pulls down his eyelid to show the room number on his eye. Every occupant has this somewhere on their body. He goes on to explain that the book also has a system in place that makes reaching page 0 impossible. The book is designed so that the lower the page number, the faster the body rots. Those in rooms below 100 can't even enter their neighbors' rooms without crumbling completely. All the scientists bunch up together in a creepy panel and laugh, telling Alice that she'll never make it to page 0 and warn her not to go any further. Alice just smiles and asks them a question. How can they tell which scientist was the original? All at once they answer, me of course, and point to themselves, which sends them all into a furious argument and they start fighting over who's the original. As they do, Alice keeps on smiling and walks into the next room. Chapter 7, Run Towards Death. We get another montage of the rooms that Alice is running through, although the guests and their wishes have become completely unhinged and disturbing. The further she goes down, the longer the guests have been there, which has slowly made them go insane, and their wishes are a body horror nightmare as they twist into deformed shapes. At the same time, Alice's body has begun rotting away again at a much faster pace this time. In fact, the rot has completely covered her body and turns her into something of a body horror exhibit of her own. In In one of the standout panels of the manga, we see her running full blast while her face has taken a twisted and grotesque form. Once again, the art here is stellar. The serpent appears and wonders if the maddening pain has crushed her mind yet. She just leaps over him and runs to the next door, rapidly passing through the rooms while her body becomes less and less human. Eventually, she gets to room 100, remembering what the scientist said about those that travel to the pages below. Still, she enters room 99, and immediately her body rots severely and starts to crumble, collapsing to the ground like a broken husk. The serpent arrives and declares her dead before laughing maniacally. He gleefully says that this is the result of those who seek to escape. You'll only die and turn into words. However, as he goes on his "I told you so" rant, Alice seems to move, and out from her deformed shell of a body, her human fingers poke through. Alice then stands up out of the crumbled shell like a cicada shedding its skin, and she fully emerges, looking completely fine. Chapter 8, Guests. Back to her normal self, she looks up at the serpent with her big eyes, and begins walking forward. The serpent is stunned and can't make any sense of it. Alice simply smiles as she passes him, and then breaks into a full sprint towards the next room. As soon as she gets through the door, her body instantly rots into another broken shell, but Alice simply leaps out from the shell, once again fully renewed. The serpent watches in shock as Alice moves with beast-like speed through the rooms, constantly rotting and reviving over and over. He tries to understand it. Is this a system error? Does she somehow possess an immortal body? Whatever it is, he says he can sense the candle of her life going out. There's no question that she's dying hundreds of times over. Finally, Alice reaches the final door, to room 000. As she walks into the room, she steps out of another dead husk, renewed again. In the room is another door with a magnificent structure around it. The serpent says that this is the table of contents, and he demands Alice tell him how it's possible that she got here. Alice starts to walk towards the final door, and at the same time she speaks, saying, "Once upon a time, in a certain island country." The serpent interrupts her, and she just smiles at him, saying, "We'll continue this later." And then she enters the last door. As she walks through, the number 431 dissolves from her hand, and she disappears. From the doorway, strange symbols appear like that of what we saw in the serpent's mouth before. Up above are hundreds of lights representing the many rooms. The ones with occupants are lit up. Of course, room 431 goes out. As the serpent rages out over Alice, the light of room 431 suddenly lights back up. Could it be Alice? Did she somehow return? Then the remaining rooms rapidly begin to fill, and all the lights are blinking on until finally all the rooms up to 666 are occupied. The serpent is shocked and elated at what he's seeing. The manor is now full, and the serpent's eyes shine white. Chapter 9, Banquet. The long wait is over at last, and massive cables with symbols on them burst from the structure and into the serpent as he screams out that the party has begun. He seems to take on a more sinister shape as the cables fill his body with I'm not sure what. The serpent disappears onto the floor and arrives at room 666. The guest has just arrived and stands up in surprise as the demented serpent lunges at him, devouring the man whole. After doing so, the serpent grows more arms and moves to the next room to consume another meal. He travels rapidly through the rooms, eating their occupants, the new arrivals as well as some familiar faces from the rooms that Alice visited, like the bullied student. In the outside world, the book still sits upon Alice's bed, and it begins to glow with sparks shooting out. It floats into the air, fluttering violently, and the guests of the many rooms can feel the effects, including the scientist, and he realizes that the feast has begun and that the serpent is arriving. As he and his clones are sucked into the great beast's mouth, he says, "O serpent, enjoy reality to your heart's content," as if he knows something that the serpent doesn't. The serpent continues onward after consuming every guest and jumps through the door in room 0. In the outside world, we can see the serpent's twisted form manifesting into reality from the book. It is a hell of a sight, like a Dali painting mixed with Junji Ito. Now a massive beast, he bursts through the dome in the city, emerging as basically a kaiju. Chapter 10, Remembrance. The serpent, now a towering monstrosity, sees his reflection in a nearby building and is pleased to finally enter the real world. He starts crushing buildings just for the thrill of interacting with something real, I suppose. And then he notices that nobody is here and he's alone. In a sort of rage, he conjures up an energy blast, ripping the city up even more, and demands that the humans come out to worship him. Then from nearby, he can hear someone singing a nursery rhyme. A young girl appears atop a crumbled skyscraper, and it is none other than Alice, and it looks like she's ready to tell the serpent the rest of her story. Once upon a time in a certain island country, there lived a unforgetful princess. The girl was terribly ill and couldn't go outside, so instead she read. Possibly because of her strange illness or because she was born with it, she had a peculiar memory. Once she'd seen or read something, she would never forget it, like an extreme photographic memory. Because of this, she could absorb information at a blinding speed. She had books ordered from all over the world and of every genre until she had a library full of them and became obsessed with knowledge. She wanted to know as much as possible about the world that she couldn't see with her own eyes. She wanted to know everything, the whole truth of the world. Eventually, she made plans to create the book to end all books. Here we see the construction of some bizarre and enormous device that seems to be channeling energy into the book, and the princess named this book that contained all knowledge the Book of Truth. We can see her reach out and grab the book, which begins to transform her into a giant hideous beast. She immediately begins turning the servants into words and consuming them. The book automatically transcribes all human memories and emotions, and so the princess and the book were now one, turning humans into knowledge and storing them within herself. Now we know what all the massive guns were for, as the humans attempt to fight off this monstrosity that was laying waste to the population. They built a massive gun that could shoot biblioclastic rounds imbued with concentrated magic, using ribbons of knowledge to seal the beast in a large tomb. The very same sphere that was cracked open at the beginning, and if you hadn't pieced it together, Alice is the princess and she was the beast sealed within the sphere. I would have never expected the manga to go this route, but man, I love the world building here. Plus, biblioclastic ammunition is such a wild and creative concept. Chapter 11, The Great War. The war against the princess had ended and the people celebrated. As the years passed, the population grew and a city was built around the prison. As time went on, so did technology, and using the princess's research notes, scientists were able to create their own copies of the Book of Truth with lower page counts to be used in war. Here we can see a creature that looks like the serpent being fused into the book, and looking at its cover, it's clear that this is the very one that the serpent emerged from. Despite making copies, these were inferior knockoffs that couldn't even decipher words that they'd eaten, but they were powerful enough to be useful for the human army, until their research facility was bombed, burning up most of the books. A few lucky copies survived and were scattered across the globe. Time passed again, and soon the humans forgot about the Book of Truth that they had put to sleep. Then, nearly 150 years after the Great War had ended, the Book of Truth opened up once again. We can see the sphere crack open and an obscured monster break free and start consuming humans after turning them into words. The public freaks out and tries to figure out what's going on, but the internet is flooded with bad information and theories, making it hard to know what to believe or who to trust. As Alice tells the story, she laughs about how, in the end, they're the same as her, looking for information in order to live. There's a great 2-page spread of Alice in a massive Cthulhu-like form destroying the city. With no other option, the human military recycled some of the biblioclastic rounds from a bygone era and fired them once again at the beast. However, this time, it did nothing to the book, who had already eaten plenty, and so the second war ended with the book gaining victory. In the present, Alice explains how she got so many people to enter the manor so quickly. She says that she just forcefully showed the serpent to her food. We get a glimpse once again to all the people tied up at the bottom of the sphere, and can see Alice showing them the serpent book, which absorbs them. Because she used up so many of these people, she had to get more food elsewhere, which is why the city is empty. The serpent silently stares at her, and she asks him, "Did you really think you were the only book? Did you think you were special?" The serpent starts raging out, screaming for her to stop. It slashes at her with its massive tail, but she just laughs and casually jumps out of the way. Then she transforms into a creature herself. Her shadow dwarfs the serpent, and when we finally get a look at her, she can only be described as glorious. 10 times bigger than the serpent, she still looks like Alice, but in an adult form, and also resembles that of a butterfly. It's a very cool design. Chapter 12, Sunset. Alice says she was aware of the serpent's existence, and she entered knowingly because she wanted to see what was inside her worthless little brother, and nothing more. She starts laughing at him, and he runs away while the towering Alice walks slowly behind him. She then says, "Let's review." A book with far more than 666 pages was made, a book incomparably greater. As Alice speaks, she transforms into the Lovecraftian monstrosity once again, and with her mouth splitting open to reveal jagged teeth, she says that this book consumes souls even now, adding more pages to it. The serpent falls to the ground as the all-powerful Book of Truth closes in on him with her many arms, ultimately trying to absorb him along with all the information within. The serpent cries out in agony, but Alice says to rejoice, he will live on in her records. Finally, the serpent's belly bursts open and all the information within him, including the guests, come flowing out. In a beautiful few panels, the souls of all the characters we met along the journey turn into words, as Alice takes them in, saying she won't forget even the tiniest, most insignificant wavering of the serpent's heart. With his last breath, he asks her, what good will recording all this information be if all life ceases to exist? She admits that it's most likely meaningless, but she has to. The serpent is stripped of almost everything, and only a skeleton remains. Alice finishes by saying that this is her only happiness. She finishes absorbing the serpent and turns back into a little girl looking over the destroyed city as the sun sets. She says she has to consume the souls of man, adding more words, although there's no one left to read them now. We get a glimpse of the doll in the empty street with the butterfly on it, and that is the end of Bibliomania. Yeah, this was a wild ride, and while it's not as surreal or interpretive as something like Spa, it does get pretty complicated by the end and can be unclear exactly what's going on. So first I'll break down what actually happened here in chronological order, and then we can talk about theories and possible themes behind Bibliomania. So let's break it down. Alice was originally a sick girl whose illness left her unable to venture to the outside world, so instead she learned about it by reading. Due to an almost supernatural ability to absorb information, she sought to make the ultimate book that held all possible information, and using the technology and magic of her world, crafted the Book of Truth. She fused with the book and began to absorb people and all of their knowledge, quickly growing into a godlike entity, consuming millions of people until the military crafted a weapon that could at least keep her at bay and locked her in a massive sphere-like prison. After hundreds of years of slumber in this prison, she eventually broke free and began terrorizing the population once more. Only this time, she won the battle and essentially consumed every human. While she was dormant, the humans used her research to make copies of the Book of Truth to use as weapons of war. But in an attack, they were all burned except for a few copies. One of these surviving books was the Serpent. Alice searched the city until she found this copy and willingly entered it, appearing in room 431 and making her way through the book out of curiosity in her quest for knowledge. As essentially an immortal being, she beat the system and survived long enough to look through every room of the Serpent's Manor and leave out of room 0. On the outside, she used the Serpent's book to absorb her captive humans, filling the remaining pages and completing it. With this, the Serpent consumed the souls of the manor and emerged into the real world as a godlike being himself. However, he was an inferior copy. Alice easily defeated him, and ever hungry for knowledge, she then consumed the newly transformed being and all of the guests inside. It seems that Alice only allowed him to transform out of curiosity, and by completing the book, she could gain new information. However, she's now left with an almost empty world and no one left to read the Book of Truth. That about sums it up. It's actually still unclear whether she consumed the entire world's population or just this city, and on top of that, the Serpent's book wasn't the only one to survive. It mentions that the others were scattered around the world. So I imagine next, Alice will track down these other copies, or as she calls them, her little brothers and sisters, and do the same thing to them as she did to the Serpent, allowing them to transform before absorbing them. I could easily imagine a sequel where Alice tracks down the other books, or even better, an anthology series that focuses on some of the rooms we never got to see in the manor. There's a lot of possibilities there, so I really hope this manga gains more popularity online. Now let's talk about some of the themes and meaning behind this book. I can't find the author themselves explaining what it's really about, but I kind of prefer that because it makes it more open to interpretation. Probably the most common takeaway from readers seems to be escapism and the theme of desire versus reality. In the manor, the guests can have anything they wish for, but they often become fixated on the troubles of their past lives in the real world. While they use their wishes to make perfect realities for themselves, these wishes keep them stuck wallowing in bitterness, envy, and revenge. In the real world, we're forced to work through problems in order to move forward in life, but ironically, the manor's guests seem to never conquer their demons. Instead, they create realities focused around them. Another major theme is obsession with knowledge. This is sort of where the title comes into play. Bibliomania is the excessive collecting or even hoarding of books to the point where social relations or health are damaged. Alice was obsessed with seeing the outside world, and her only outlet was reading about it. Eventually she does see it, but ironically becomes a monster in the process. Instead of experiencing the real world, she instead analyzes it through words, and by doing so destroys the very thing she wanted to experience so badly. To me, this is a warning about the limits of knowledge and its contrast with actually living. There's a great quote by E.B. White: "Explaining a joke is like dissecting a frog. You understand it better, but the frog dies in the process." Now, obviously this quote is about humor, but I often relate it to life itself. For instance, you can read everything there is to know about a dog by reading books, but none of that knowledge will let you experience what it's like to play fetch or rub a dog's belly. Finally, I think there's an interesting analogy in Bibliomania regarding technology and the internet. When Alice emerges in the modern day and starts wreaking havoc, no one knows what's true or what to do because of the overload of online information. This is obviously a real problem as information gets harder and harder to verify, especially when you throw AI into the mix. What's interesting is that Bibliomania was originally published in 2016 from what I can tell, but this sequence of people panicking online eerily mirrors the breakdown of information that happened in 2020 and after, somewhat predicting the dangers of too much information. Anyway, I could dissect this book to death, but I'm curious what you guys think. What did you get out of it? Let me know in the comments. Shout out to Kill Me Katie as always for the intro and outro music, which is likely playing right now. And if you want to see your art at the end of my videos, email me a submission to the address below with a name or social media handle. But I appreciate you guys watching at all. This is Grease speaking. Goodbye, friends.